together on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christies. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christies tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme. It's 6 o'clock. It's Monday, the 8th of April.
This is Breakfast with Isabel Webster and, for the moment, me, Tom Harwood.
Yeah, looking a little bit different this morning. Eamonn on his way in, been caught up in storm. Kathleen, more on that a little bit later on.
A boost for pensioners as the government's state pension rise, with a raft of other benefits are set to be introduced from today. We'll be speaking to Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride at the end of the hour.
North America is set to be dazzled by a solar eclipse later today, but there are spots a bit closer to home where you can also possibly get a glimpse.
And amid a swirl of rumours and allegations, Isla Fisher has hired Prince Charles and Paul McCartney's top lawyer in her divorce with Sacha Baron Cohen.
Plus our debate, 7:20 today, amid a rise in Brits seeking risky overseas medical treatment. We'll be debating whether it's better to seek help at home or abroad.
Hello, good morning. We'll see some bright weather around today, but things will generally be turning more unsettled as we go through the day, particularly across parts of England and Wales. I'll have all the details later.
And a little bit of housekeeping to tell you about as well. A few changes here at GB News. You know how much we love to get views. They're such a central part of our programme. We're changing the way we're doing that from today. The way you get in touch is very much still going to be a central theme, but we want your views, posts and comments all entered via our website, which is gbnews.com/your say. It's going to take a few days to bed in, so bear with us.
But it should be a bit easier.
Yes.
Not so much clunky email interface, all this newfangled internet technology. Wonderful stuff.
Yeah, and if you are a GB News member, then you will get priority with your views, and we'll hopefully be live streaming some of those on our screens as well. So watch the space, all change, but don't worry, your views absolutely central to the programme still.
Well, let's get to our top story this morning. Millions of elderly people are set to be better off from today as a £900 boost to the state pension comes into force with new triple lock changes.
And it's not just pensioners. All working age benefits such as job seekers allowance, housing benefit and universal credit are also set to rise.
This comes as, despite the strain on the public purse, the Chancellor pledged to maintain the triple lock at the end, till the end of the decade.
So will these latest economic boosters be enough to help turn the tide for the Prime Minister? Let's get the thoughts of the political commentator Benedict Spencer this morning. And good morning to you. And I suppose that question almost says it all, really. Is this more now about trying to appeal to a particular demographic to win an election than trying to balance the books? Because we know how expensive the triple lock is.
Yes, it's wonderful, isn't it, to think that, a government that's sort of desperately hanging on by its fingernails is effectively trying to bribe an entire cohort that may or may not vote for it, and on the face of it probably isn't going to vote for it. I mean, I don't think it's going to play much difference. I don't think it's going to have much difference when it comes to the government's flailing efforts to try and shore up its vote. I think an awful lot of people are being turned off the Tories as it is, and that does include, I think, the grey vote. I think a lot of them simply aren't going to come out and vote for them whenever the election is. But I also think, frankly, that it's... I understand why they're doing it, and this is the case with all of the benefits that are going to be rising. If they were to cut these things, if there were to be a reduction in the amount of money being handed out to people, the Labour Party would turn around and see, well, here is another example of how badly the Tories have managed the economy. They can no longer afford to pay you. And people would obviously not vote for them then. But, it does sort of take the biscuit, I think, slightly to understand the amount of money that's being added, especially to the triple lock pension, when you consider the number of other areas of the state expenditure that are not going up. I think that it is perhaps the one area that didn't need to rise, perhaps not quite as much as it has done, especially, I think, when you consider the number of pensioners who are becoming millionaires every year as a result of the inflation of their assets. So I don't think it'll shore up their vote. But, that's why they've done it ultimately, in a desperate bid to hope that it does.
Well, it's fair to say that there are millions of pensioner households that are now millionaires due to assets, but there are also pensioners who live in a very, very different state of affairs. There are pensioners who do suffer real poverty in this country. Is it not justifiable to raise pensions, as has happened today, by more than benefits, given these are people who've paid in for all of their lives?
But they haven't paid into the tune that they are currently receiving. And this, I'm afraid, is the thing that pensioners very often forget. They believe that they have paid in and therefore are getting exactly what they deserve. They've paid in significantly less on average. Now, I would be very much in favour of some sort of means-tested or, slightly more means-tested system where the neediest pensioners were given more money, but perhaps at the expense of those who don't. And as we've seen, actually, very few pensioners used to be millionaires. Increasingly, as a result of political decisions across this country, they are becoming so in large numbers. It is the case, ultimately, that there are many who simply do not need this rise. Ultimately, especially also when you consider that there are millions of working-age families, and not even families, people who would like to enter into families, people who would like to start families, who are unable to do so because of the sheer lack of money. To sort of see more money going to people who have not paid in the equivalent amount over their lifetime, being propped up by these people, the next generation, who are unable to get on that sort of first proper rung of civilization, start a family, own a house, all that sort of thing, I think is slightly egregious.
OK, well, I can imagine lots of our audience will have thoughts on this. Just a reminder, gbnews.com/you'll say if they do want to get involved. Just while you're talking about other areas to spend that money on, perhaps, there's been lots of talk over the weekend, hasn't there, on defence spending, all eyes on the situation in Israel as well. Is defence an area you think where the government's going to feel more and more pressure to up spending, given how fragile peace seems to be at the moment?
It is and it isn't. I mean, there have been a sort of steady drip feed of stories about how the UK isn't ready for war, how we might need to bring back conscription over the last couple of weeks and months. I think just sort of across the board, though, there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of what it is that we might be required to do. The UK doesn't really give very much to Israel in terms of military aid, certainly not in terms of actual military assistance. And our involvement in the Middle East these days is absolutely insignificant when compared to, say, that of the United States. It is also, it must be said, very unlikely we're going to find ourselves in a protracted conflict with Russia. I think that would be a disastrous situation were that to happen. But what does concern me is when you consider things like the replacement for the Trident nuclear deterrent is also overdue, and there's not the money for that, and whatever money we would be able to find for it would have to be cannibalized from other budgets. Equally, we're not in a position where we can defend our overseas territories very efficiently. So it's one of those things where it isn't on the immediate horizon. But, of course, wars very rarely are. They never really sort of come along in a timely fashion just as and when you're ready for them. So it's one of those things where you do feel, well, it would be better if we were getting a little bit more prepared for it. Because of the nature of how these things tend to break out. So perhaps not the most pressing thing, but you don't want it to become a pressing thing, put it that way.
And if anything, it's more likely to become a pressing thing if you don't prepare for it. It's almost that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. The moment that you deplete your armed forces is precisely when the enemies of you might strike. But just finally, Benedict, this is all in the context of a sclerotic economy, of an economy that, yes, it was back to growth in January, but by 0.1%, comparing to the growth that the Americans are seeing, for example, it's nowhere near. In fact, all of continental Europe is growing very, very slowly. What's Europe doing wrong that America's doing right?
Well, Europe, having sort of kick-started the Industrial Revolution, especially in Britain, or the Renaissance and all of these other things, has decided now that we've reached our level. It's decided that it's discovered what all that there is to be discovered, and that there isn't now a nascent industry that it doesn't want to regulate. And I'm afraid that that's as much the case for the UK as anywhere else. One of the massive perks of Brexit was supposed to be that we were going to be able to deregulate or re-regulate any industry that we wanted to become an industry leader wherever we chose, and we have chosen simply not to do that. We've decided to sort of carry on business as usual. So it's the tricky thing is, I think in the United States, as well as the sort of the happy marriage that they have into access to finance, access to resources, there is also the attitude, certainly in some states, that progress for progress's sake almost is worthy of pursuit. Whereas in Europe, I think we take very much the opposite attitude. And I think anybody who remembers what it was like being a member of the European Union, being told, absolutely not, you can't do this, X, Y, Z, because Europe says you can't, would sympathise with that. But there really is no excuse. Britain has been outside of the European Union now for some time, and on the watch of this Conservative government, I think has failed to take advantage of the opportunities potentially provided by Brexit. We no longer need to be in this situation, yet we continue to choose to be. Sadly, I don't think that things are going to change under Labour. Labour are continuity, big state, big regulation. So we're in for another 5 or 5.5 years, depending on when Rishi Sunak decides to call the election, of sluggish growth.
Okay. Benedict Spence, political commentator, thank you very much indeed for your time. And just a reminder, gbnews.com/your say is how you send us your views from today.
What a cheery way to start the morning.
I know, nothing like sclerotic growth. I love it, that's the phrase for me. If you have just tuned in and you're wondering what on earth has happened to Eamonn Holmes, looking a little bit different this morning.
Yeah,
he's had a shocker, hasn't he?
Oh, no, he has. It's actually been a really quite dramatic morning with regard to Storm Kathleen. Eamonn was up in Scotland over the weekend and has had his travel plans rather affected.
Yeah, lots of flights, as I'm sure you're all aware, and trains and all the rest of it have been delayed. Eamonn, no different, caught up in that. There were some calls made to British Airways yesterday afternoon, I believe, saying to them, if you do not get Mr Eamonn Holmes back to London, we may not have a breakfast programme. Tom's very kindly stepped in. We think Eamonn has made it home and will be with us shortly.
Do you know what it reminds me of? Do you remember when Priti Patel had gone across to Israel and every journalist in the land was tracking her plane as it came back to London in order to see if she would be sacked by the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson or not? Not a directly applicable comparison, but it does feel like I want to get up flight radar or something and track
Well, he's
Eamonn's
no longer
progress.
in the sky, but lots of people were caught up in those disruptions from Storm Kathleen. My parents as well, travelling back from Scotland yesterday, also had their flight delayed. It's been a nightmare. So who better to talk to now than Simon Calder, travel editor at The Independent, who's actually been booked to talk to us about a total eclipse. But if, Simon, you'll indulge us first of all, a word or two to you this morning. Good morning. About the problems that we faced and now train strikes today. It's been a bit of a nightmare. You can understand Eamonn's a little bit late for us this morning.
Yes, absolutely. I've been using the Find My Eamonn feature on my phone, and it's not working, I'm afraid. So, Tom, well done. Yes, good morning, everybody, and another really tough day for travellers. It's been a very rough weekend. We had so many flight cancellations on Saturday and Sunday, ferries all over the place, particularly in the Western Isles of Scotland, and trains. Well, yes, there's another strike today. This is by train drivers belonging to the ASLEF union and specifically working for those train operators which bring the vast majority of London commuters into town. That's Southeastern, Southwestern, Southern, Thameslink, Great Northern and Greater Anglia. Almost all of them, of trains on those operators will be cancelled. There are going to be a few services. So, for instance, Greater Anglia is shuttling to and from Stansted Airport, as well as running some trains up and down the line to and from Norwich. To get to Gatwick, there's a shuttle service between Victoria and the airport at Gatwick. That's the only service that Southern is running. And then a few trains heading down to Ashford from London St Pancras and to Woking from Waterloo. But that's more or less your lot. As a result of that, of course, there will be hundreds of thousands of people who will be working from home today. Maybe it will kind of convince them that working from home is the way forward. But there is no suggestion that the dispute is anywhere near over. They haven't had any talks for a year.
Oh, well, that's happy news, Simon. Thank you for that. But of course, you're talking to us from Montreal, which is perhaps at the north of that big banana shape across the American continent, the centre of this eclipse that we're going to see today. Firstly, what can the Americans expect? But perhaps more importantly, are we going to get a look in over here in the UK?
Really good questions. OK, yes, the Great American Eclipse 2024 is going to sweep across the North American continent from Mazatlan on the Pacific coast of Mexico, all the way through Texas, up through the Midwest, then over Cleveland, Ohio, Niagara Falls, which is where I was hoping to be, and then finally, past Montreal, over the Newfoundland in Atlantic Canada, and setting just before sunset. Now, the thing is, first of all, you will only get a total eclipse on that stripe, that line of totality. So you will only see the amazing effect of the sun suddenly disappearing in the middle of the day if you're on that line. There are going to be parts of Western United Kingdom where you will be able to see a partial eclipse towards sunset. Do not look straight to the sun without
bit there, Simon, but that was really good advice. Never look directly at the sun. There are always these tips about using a colander and a piece of paper, because I've covered a few too many solar eclipses in my time. And if you hold the colander up to the sky and a piece of paper, as the sun passes through and creates this illusion on the paper, you can actually watch it. I mean, it feels like...
Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I've seen it. I've been with the whole school of children.
Oh, fantastic.
For live television whilst that's been happening. It does work,
I
but
saw
it's preferable to burning your eyeballs.
I saw the last solar eclipse that Washington, D.C. had when I was over there in 2017. And we all got given special glasses to look up, although at the time President Trump ignored that advice and created quite a few headlines by squinting at the sun.
Oh, OK. Well, listen, we say goodbye to Simon. Thank you for his efforts. I hope he makes it to Niagara Falls, quite away from Montreal, it has to be said, in Canada. But if you do make it, Simon, check out Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's actually my favourite place, much nicer than Niagara Falls. It's gorgeous. Gorgeous.
It's actually really interesting looking at the Airbnb bookings in America. There was an image doing the rounds yesterday online that just showed across that banana, across the United States, they're all full up. You can't get a single hotel across this very specific line, so lots of people interested.
31.6 million Americans are on that banana stretch. Lucky things. We're lucky, I think, if we're going to even catch a glimpse.
Well, I think if you're in Northern Ireland, Scotland, Liverpool...
Best chance.
Cornwall as well.
Flimsy
just
chance.
the very west, yeah.
Right, 6:16 is the time. Let's take a look at some of the other stories coming into the GB News newsroom.
Police have named a suspect as the search continues for the man who stabbed a woman to death in broad daylight in Bradford city centre. West Yorkshire police detectives are searching for 25-year-old Habiba Massoum, who's from the Oldham area. They were called to the scene on Saturday afternoon following reports of an attack on a woman pushing a baby in a pram. The victim was taken to hospital, where she later died.
The Deputy Prime Minister has denied claims that the UK is failing to prepare for war. Oliver Dowden's defending the government after the outgoing Armed Forces Minister, James Heappey, told The Telegraph only the Ministry of Defence officials attended a wartime preparation exercise which was meant for the whole of government. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has backed him up, saying too many in government are just hoping everything goes away.
And a British man nicknamed Hardest Geezer has become the first person to run the length of Africa. Russell Cook from Worthing in West Sussex crossed the finish line in Tunisia after running, forget this, 352 days. The 27-year-old said he'd previously struggled with his mental health, gambling and drinking, and wanted to make a difference.
And as if running a marathon every day is not hard enough, he was also mugged whilst he was doing that, and he was also kidnapped.
Faced a kidnapping as well in the Congo.
And he's also run previously from Asia to the UK, and in total he's raised nearly £1 million single-handedly. So no wonder he's called the Hardest Geezer. He is formidable, incredible story.
Really remarkable stuff. I'm just amazed that no one had run the length of it before. It took until 2024 for this to happen.
Well, it's not that easy, I'd imagine. There's a lot of desert around Namibia, I think, to get through. Anyway, other big news this morning, the killers of 23-year-old Cody Fisher are to be sentenced today. The semi-professional footballer was murdered in a nightclub on Boxing Day in 2022.
Well, a jury in Birmingham Crown Court found 23-year-old Remy Gordon and 22-year-old Cammy Carpenter guilty of his murder. Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has the story.
This is the moment Remy Gordon was arrested by police just 2 days after murdering 23-year-old Cody Fisher in a nightclub in Birmingham. Fisher was a talented footballer, having played for Stratford Town and Bromsgrove Sporting, and was enjoying a night out on Boxing Day in 2022 when he was fatally stabbed in the chest. His murderers Remy Gordon and Cammy Carpenter killed Cody in a pre-planned act of revenge on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub in Digbeth, Birmingham. 2 days before his death, Cody Fisher was out with friends on Christmas Eve in a different nightclub when he accidentally bumped into Gordon's back. This CCTV footage shows the two in conversation. Fisher believed he'd done nothing wrong, but was threatened with violence. After the confrontation, Remy Gordon found a picture of Cody online and asked his friends to help identify him. Seen here messaging a group chat only 45 minutes after the initial incident, Gordon says he's due to shank him up. Cody's simple mistake would turn out to be the catalyst for his murder. Fast forward to Boxing Day and Cody Fisher can be seen in this footage arriving at the Crane nightclub. A few hours later, his murderers Remy Gordon and Cammy Carpenter turn up and smuggle a weapon through security. Gordon had found out from friends in the hours before Cody was going to be there. Just before midnight, CCTV shows violence breaking out. It's at this moment Fisher is fatally stabbed in the chest, with the knife penetrating a valve in his heart. He's later pronounced dead at the scene. West Midlands Police Detective Inspector Michelle Thurgood led the investigation.
Getting a call to say somebody's been murdered in a nightclub in the dark that has over 2,000 people is a challenge in itself. However, with the assistance of CCTV and then from the appeal that we put out to the public, we were able in the preceding days to piece together who are potential suspects, and then particularly in terms of the suspects with absolute minutiae detail, watch and re-watch the CCTV, which was a process that took months, not days.
Alongside Gordon and Carpenter, the jury cleared 19-year-old friend of Gordon's, Regan Anderson, of murder and manslaughter, but found him guilty of affray.
We'll have all been that person that's either been pushed or pushed somebody in a crowded premise, and normally it might be through crosswords, it might be an apology, and that's the end of it. But I guess we'll never understand why Remy Gordon took such an affront to this that led to the events of Boxing Day.
In a tribute by Cody's mum, Tracy Fisher, she said he was brave, fearless and the most genuine soul she knew, adding it was a pleasure and honour to call him my son. Jack Carson, GB News.
Follow that case here on GB News throughout the day and bring you the latest just as soon as their sentences come in.
Well, in the meantime, let's get our latest weather update with Marco Petagana.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm afraid we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing further spells of rain at times, coupled with quite strong winds at times too. Back to the detail for today, and we've got some bright weather across the south and east of the UK during the morning, but notice showery bursts of rain out towards the west, up across parts of northern England, and further showery bursts of rain will work their way up from the south into many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, after a bright start, will see some rain later, whereas Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine throughout the day, just a bit of patchy rain across the far south later on. Feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine in the north, up to 12 degrees, but the warmest temperatures generally down towards the southeast, coupled with that wind and rain though. As for the evening and during the overnight period, we'll see some clearer spells developing across the southeast of the UK for a time, and some clear spells towards the far northwest, but on the whole low pressure will be dominating the scene, giving a lot of wind and rain, particularly windy down towards the southwest, and wherever you are, with that wind and rain around, it will stay quite mild for the time of year. As for Tuesday, well, another very unsettled day on the cards across the UK. Low pressure sitting right across the UK, bringing spells of wind and rain. The wettest weather generally likely up towards southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Could see up to 2 inches of rain in places here. And the windiest weather generally out towards the west and across some southern coasts of England, with gales in places here at times. Temperatures generally cooler than over the last few days, up to 12 or 13 Celsius at best.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now it is time for our biggest giveaway of the year so far. You won't believe what's up for grabs this time. It's your chance to win £10,000 in cash, luxury travel items and A 2025 Greek cruise worth £10,000.
Wow.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. Well, the prize package in total is worth, of course, over £20,000, and it could be yours. Here's how you could win.
Yamas.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
See, what I like about this giveaway is, unlike the last one, which was all about spring, this one just screams summer to me.
And I think we all need a bit of summer.
We all need a bit of summer. That Greek music, I feel like I'm on the set of Mamma Mia or something. Don't get Andrew Pearce started. He's an absolutely huge Mamma Mia fan.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Have you seen the musical?
I went with Andrew Pearce.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. And then all the sort of, what are they called? I was about to say flip-flops. I mean, what are the things you put in your...
Flip-flops?
No, not flippers. Swimming
Yes,
gear.
I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean?
Guys, help us out. Those things...
It's too early in the morning for this.
Flippers.
Are they called flippers? I think they're called flippers.
There is a very good scene when they're all in flippers.
Marvellous. Anyway.
Stay with us, lots more coming your way. The actress Isla Fisher, she's getting serious now. She's hired Paul McCartney and Prince Charles's divorce lawyer to organise her split from Sacha Baron Cohen. All the details after this.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Are our relationships with foreign countries actually undermining free speech on a day-to-day basis in our universities?
Well, it's very good to be with you. It's difficult to form a kind of clear conclusion because, as we know, universities are much, much more reliant on international fees than they used to be. We are seeing some sort of troubling developments, particularly at the level of admissions criteria. We're seeing quite stark and frankly scandalous disparities in the admissions criteria for domestic students as against foreign students in some universities. And so part of the problem is that the financial incentive structures are such that universities risk becoming more and more dependent upon foreign regimes because they're simply bringing in an awful lot more money.
James, of course, all of this discussion, we say countries. Frankly, mainly we're really looking at one country, aren't we? China.
Well, China is certainly a focus. I mean, nearly 1 in 3 undergraduate students from overseas at Russell Group universities were from China in 2021. 60% of overseas postgraduates come from China. We know from the FBI and the Five Eyes security chiefs that China is a master at intellectual property theft. And of course, there's a whole range of human rights issue concerns over Taiwan, Tibet, Uyghur Muslims, lockdown tyranny. I mean, all of these are issues about which, researchers and academics should be free to teach and question. And in universities where there is a heavy commercial reliance on regimes like China, there are obvious disincentives to ensuring that academics and students are free to speak their mind on those issues.
Just to say thank you for those of you who are trying out our new views system, which is, of course, gbnews.com/EOSE. Quite a few of them coming through. And there's this new function which allows you to comment on other people's comments. So there's lots of conversations going on. We've just had some comments about Mamma Mia.
Yeah.
Some people not fans.
Some
then other
people
people getting involved. So we're quite enjoying that, aren't
Absolutely we are. And it really does show the essence of GB News, which is that community.
Yeah.
That is the GB News family, the expanding GB News family. It's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. staying with things that are all light-hearted, let's cross to Hollywood, shall we? Although, actually, this is a serious Hollywood story, and this is headaches for Borat star Sacha Baron Cohen. He is, of course, splitting from his wife, the actress Isla Fisher.
Well, the couple announced their divorce just days after the Bruno star and Borat star was accused of sexual harassment by actress Rebel Wilson.
Well, let's speak now to GB News showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield. Good morning, Kinsey. This is getting serious. Isla has hired the big guns, hasn't she?
That's right. I mean, Prince Charles's divorce attorneys, you know that is a skilled individual right there. But you're right. This is curious timing, this divorce announcement happening around the same time as Rebel Wilson's allegations. And Rebel Wilson is really, stirring stuff up on social media, saying that the reason that there are these delays in her book launch are because of Sacha, who not only denies these allegations, but is likely not liking the fact that Isla has filed for divorce around this time, because it's an indication that she was not willing to stand up and defend Sacha against some of these really, really damaging rumors. It is in her best interest likely to cut ties and no longer be a part of this storyline. And in the court of public opinion, obviously, Sacha and his team know that it's not a positive reflection on his character to have this beautiful actress, this woman who typically is the face of things like Time's Up and female activism, back away from her husband.
And do we know who Sacha Baron Cohen has appointed, or how he's responded to a lot of the allegations that have been levelled at him? Because Rebel Wilson, coming out and referring to him as the specific person she was describing in her book as not a particularly pleasant character, to say the least.
Well, Sacha Baron Cohen's representatives have compiled documents like call sheet schedules, script pages, and anonymous statements from several crew members who worked on the film The Brothers Grimsby to fight back. And the actor's rep said that these materials that they have absolutely dispute Wilson's claims that Baron Cohen asked her to perform any sort of sexual acts that weren't related to the movie. He did post a very loving announcement about this separation. And while the timing is, like I said, very unusual, the Mail on Sunday reports that the real reason behind the breakup, that apparently they've been separated for quite some time, but the real reason is that they couldn't decide where to live. They didn't want to live in the same country. He liked living in LA. He also liked living in London, and she wanted to be in Australia closer to her family.
They have children, don't they? And for the sake of their children, they've said they're going to try and work together, and let's hope that they can do that.
Yes. Just on another story, Jennifer Lopez has become the subject of quite a curious set of memes online. She seems to have stuck her foot in it with her new advertising campaign. What's going on?
I feel so sorry for her here, Tom. I'm not going to kid you. I feel really sympathetic for her. And I think it's also because we watched what happened with the Princess of Wales, Catherine. It's almost like now when you see online bullying, you're hyper aware of it. But she does seem to have become the victim of meme culture. You're seeing a lot of people teasing her over these new, she's got 2 new movies on Amazon Prime. One is scripted, one is a documentary. This has affected her in real life. She has canceled 7 dates of her first North American tour in 5 years. This is in support of her new album, This Is Me Now. But she's had to cancel those dates and then completely rebrand this tour as a greatest hits tour in hopes of, selling more tickets. But, you're seeing this kind of online vitriol leak into the real world and negatively affect her career. So, when I see meme TikToks, now I'm in a place where I kind of question whether or not the story's true, and I hesitate to consume it. But she's getting a lot of heat online right now.
Shame, that's horrible to say. We should always call out bullying, Kinsey. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date on all the showbiz news this morning.
Thank you.
Well, still to come, we're going to be going through the front pages and biggest stories of the day with Dawn Neeson and Lewis Oakley. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and, for the moment, me, Tom Harwood.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Lancashire, the A674 is closed in both directions along Preston Old Road in Blackburn after a fire. In Cheshire, the A553 is closed southbound over the Silver Jubilee Bridge from Widnes to Runcorn for work on the Central Expressway. In London, Boston Road in Hanwell is blocked for an investigation between Uxbridge Road and Lower Boston Road. Number of train services aren't running because of industrial action, with no C2C train services running into and out of Fenchurch Street in London. Cowk Express services aren't running. There are no trains on the Isle of Wight between Ryde Pierhead and Shanklin. Train services suspended between Plymouth and Gunnerslake because of a points failure. And in Cornwall, there's a report of an accident on the A388 at Launceston. And that is the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Patrick Christies. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christies tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Just to let you know, in case you're just tuning in, the big man, Mr. Eamonn Holmes himself, has been caught up in Storm Kathleen, would you believe? We've been reporting it all week here on GB News, and he has been our perfect case study because he was stuck in Glasgow, arrived at the airport at 11 a.m, was still there. I don't think he even got home by 11 p.m. last night. So we believe he's going to make it in this morning. Calls were made to British Airways to try and make sure he didn't ruin our whole programme.
But for the moment, you're stuck with me.
We're stuck with you
until Eamonn arrives.
It's been very lovely. Thank you for stepping into the break. You're doing your own show later on.
I am indeed.
Double whammy. There you go.
Very great fun.
Well, it's time now to look at the newspapers this morning. We're going to look at the front pages to kick things off. Here's The Guardian. They're leading with what could potentially be, I think, quite a big story. The Express always leading with this. This is about unpaid carers being taken to court over what's described as heart-rending minor errors, but you try telling them they're minor when they could be forced to pay up to as much as £20,000.
Really shocking. Now, the Daily Mail leads with a message for Keir Starmer saying, Rayner's making a fool of you, Keir. This, of course, about her situation with regard to paying capital gains tax, or not paying that, on what people think might have been her primary residence.
A couple of newspapers focusing on this story this morning. The Mirror is talking about Brits going abroad, not for their holidays, but for cosmetic surgery and also for vet treatment in a combo package. They're saying places like Turkey are doing very well out of this. We'll be debating that very topic at 7:20.
Now, the Times leads with the rise of the 24-hour wait for a bed in A&E. 24 hours. Wow.
That's a long time. Telegraph leading with Lord Cameron's warning to the United States over Kyiv's aid bloc.
Well, joining us to go through what's making the news is the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the writer and podcaster, Lewis Oakley. Dawn, shall we start with you? What have you picked out?
Well, it's the Guardian front page, as you've both just said quite rightly. It's a really shocking story. I mean, to be a carer for someone you love is the hardest thing you can do. There is no downside. It is literally 24/7. So this is concerning people who care for loved ones, basically. They can claim an allowance of £81.90 a week. On top of that, they are allowed to work as well, part-time, and they are allowed to earn what was it now? Allowed to £151 a week they're allowed to earn. A single penny over that and they are classified as being overpaid. So the computer system at the DWP says, right, OK, we've overpaid you, so you'll have to pay it back. But the computer doesn't work that well, Tom.
Right.
So it doesn't do it every time they are overpaid. And mostly it's a mistake. You get a bit of overtime, you don't budget it properly. It's very, very simple to do. But the computer doesn't keep up to date. So it goes on and on for months. You're not aware of it 'cause you're working really hard.
And you build up a huge amount of money that you then have to pay back.
Yep, so people who are at home on their own, really struggling, as I said, it's incredibly hard work, earning a pittance in any case, suddenly get a bill for £20,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
and what can you do? You can't.
It has smacks of the post office scandal, this story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whereby the government have put perhaps too much trust in a computer system, and the checks and balances aren't there for people, and you know, even more than in the post office scandal, these are vulnerable people, and actually the carers are people who are already saving the taxpayers a huge amount of money, and to penalise them in this way, it just feels so wrong.
This is the cost-effective way to do it, to have people care and pay them an allowance. So they're saving us millions of pounds by doing this, and to find that the system is effectively booby traps. This isn't people trying to game the system.
No.
This is people that are caring for someone, having to take a little bit of money for that, and also working a job on side, trying to balance that. And I think if you read this headline this morning, you're probably going to be quite nervous of, oh my God, have I gone over by a penny? What's coming for me? And imagine if you're the person being cared for. Maybe it's your daughter or your son, and you think, I've got them into all of this mess, and there's this bill, and we can't afford to pay it, and it's all my fault. It's immoral.
What needs to happen here? I mean, Tom, you'll have a sort of political slant on all of this, but, you know, is there a Care Quality Commission issue that needs to be looked into? Is it specifically the government that needs to be sorting this out ASAP?
Or, frankly, there's an argument for using better technology that keeps up to date with this all the time. The idea that you've got these long time lags that then kick into gear but far, far too late, that's obviously a big issue. But on the other hand, I totally see why this was introduced in terms of you don't want people who are very, very wealthy getting lots of taxpayers' money.
Lewis, let's talk about this story which has captured our imagination this morning. This double whammy where you go and you get, I don't know, a bum lift or something, and you take your pet and they can have a, I don't know, they can get
well, they say pets look like they're boners, don't they?
It's, yes, you can have the same treatment at the same time, and happening in Turkey. What on earth is this?
Well, it's great. So this is taking the Mirror's front page. So basically, to get a nose job and your cat taken care of at the same time in this country in Turkey is about £4,500. No, sorry, that's in Turkey it's £4,500. Here it'd be £9,000. So there is a massive saving to be made. I mean, I'm all for personal choice. If you want to get a dog and look good whilst walking it, fantastic. This is great for you. Obviously, we hear a lot of horror stories from Turkey of, you know, sort of people flying back into Heathrow and their bum cheek explodes or something. So I think it is about being very careful when you go abroad for any sort of cosmetic procedures of making sure that they are, you know, up to standard and that you've read the reviews. But I don't have a problem with people doing this.
But I think the vet angle in this is what's new, really, isn't it, Dawn? Because look, people have been going to Turkey for a long time, whether it's dentistry or, you know, hair transplants or whatever. But we've been talking, actually on Breakfast, about the rising vet costs in this country soaring and people being ripped off in many instances.
Exactly that.
So they think, actually, I'm just going to take Monty off to, you know, off for a little weekend away.
If you're fancy world, Isabel, a bum lift of Monty, right? Okay.
I don't want a bum lift.
No, I mean, vets bills in this country and pet insurance. I mean, more people are paying more for their pet insurance than their own life insurance. It's ridiculously expensive. You can't afford not to have your animal insured. So, you know, everything you do is going to be cheaper in Turkey. Getting your teeth done, getting your bum done, Isabel, that's fine.
My bum's plenty turkey.
So, but it's the double package. I mean, you know, I agree with Lewis. I mean, if you want to go and get it done, go and get it done. But obviously, choose wisely.
Well, gbnews.com/your say. That's our new forum for getting in touch this morning. And conversations, I must say, are being had. That's the new little mechanism. You can talk to each other. So if you are thinking about taking your little Monty for a bum lift in Turkey, let us know.
I have to say, Isabel, when I said, I'll step in for Eamonn at this time, I realise that at this time in the morning, quite so much conversation about bum lifts.
Eamonn likes talking about my bum, maybe more than you do.
Shall we move on? Dawn,
I'm not talking about my bum.
Well, I mean, but perhaps let's go from cosmetic to real need for medical attention, because the waiting times in A&E, it's a scandal.
It is, the headline on the front of the Times, rise of the 24-hour wait for a bed in A&E, and more than 150 patients waited more than 24 hours in A&E before getting a hospital bed. That's a tenfold increase on 2019, but a 600-fold fold increase on 2015. I mean, and 250, as we learned the other week in that story, 250 patients a week are dying because they're not getting through the A&E system quickly enough. Now, lots and lots of questions here, and Isabel and I were talking about this earlier on, and it depends. You know, Isabel had a brilliant experience with her little boy in a hospital recently. A relative of mine, elderly relative, was literally on a trolley outside the emergency care department for 2 days.
It's a complete postcode lottery.
For 2 days, yeah, absolutely. And he wasn't alone. There were lots and lots of people on trolleys, many of them elderly, many with dementia, many of them very, very scared and lonely. It's a horror show. It can be a horror show. But what the answers are, I mean, we have the lowest bed per capita, hospital bed per capita, than any other country in Europe, apart from Sweden. So, I mean, we obviously need more hospital beds. We need to sort out the care system, as we were just talking about.
But also, don't we need people to stop sort of going to A&E for things that they don't need to go to A&E for?
Yeah,
a lot of people go to this just because they don't know where else to go, and sometimes entirely inappropriately.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really is, but that's because you can't get to see a GP. So what do? You go, right, I'm going to have to go to A&E, okay, because I can't
We're going to just press pause and have more from both Lewis and Dawn around 7:30, but we're interrupting that to speak to a minister. We have Mel Stride standing by because he wants to talk to us this morning about millions of elderly being better off from today. A £900 pension boost coming into force with new triple lock changes. Good morning to you, Secretary of State. This sounds good, but I mean, we've heard this before. This is re-announcing this package.
Well, no, today is an important day because today is the day that the 8.5% increase in the state pension comes in. Now, bear in mind that inflation is at 3.4%, so it's a very significant increase. It comes on top of a 10.1% increase that we provided this time last year. And the reason why we're focusing all this support on pensioners is we are absolutely determined to support pensioners. We recognise that they're often on fixed incomes, that inflation has historically been high, although it's now coming down quite rapidly. And therefore we're committed, for example, to the triple lock, which, as you know, is putting up pensions year on year by the greater of 2.5% or earnings or the level of inflation. And I think that's one of the proudest achievements, actually, of this Conservative government, that was brought that in, because it's meant that since 2010, pensioners are £1,000 a year better off than they would have been had their pensions just gone up by earnings alone.
And it is incontrovertibly true that pensions have grown faster than wages, faster than benefits over the last 14 years. Pensioners have received quite a lot more money, to the extent that actually now the state pension in the UK is ahead of the basic state pension that you could get in Germany, in Spain, in Italy. In fact, the only major country in Europe that has a higher basic state pension now is France. But there comes the question, because France, their pension system is in £14 billion of annual deficit. The whole of Europe is struggling with growth right now, the UK not alone in that. Frankly, is it sustainable to keep these rises going on faster than the rate of growth in the economy? How can it be afforded?
Well, it is sustainable is the answer, because it has to fit within, as you'll know, the Office for Budget Responsibility fiscal targets. And at every fiscal event, and every time we make these fiscal commitments, those numbers are rerun, and we have to sit within the so-called headroom that the Chancellor has. But you're absolutely right to point to the fact that UK pensions are high relative to those overseas, and in fact they're very high compared to what we had under the last Labour government. And many of your viewers may remember the 75p increase that occurred to the state pension under Gordon Brown, and we had very high levels of pensioner poverty under the last Labour government. In fact, under this government, poverty amongst pensioners has fallen by 200,000. So we are absolutely full square behind our pensioners and supporting them.
What about being full square behind pensioners to the expense, perhaps, of national security? Lots of debate over the weekend about whether or not the UK is prepared for war, whether or not the government is sleepwalking, failing to attend drills that were being put forward by former Secretary for Defence, Ben Wallace, and whether or not you think it was a mistake not to up defence spending in the budget in light of these concerns from very respected politicians within your own party.
Well, there was a huge increase in defence spend, in fact, in 2020. And in terms of our spending on defence, of course, if you look across the NATO alliance, we are the largest spender in terms of percentage of GDP amongst our European NATO members, and the second largest NATO spender, only behind the United States. Now, we have an aspiration to move from what is the NATO commitment of 2%. We're now at about heading towards 2.3% of GDP, to actually go still further to 2.5% of GDP. And bear in mind that when it comes to the various military tensions there are around the world, we were right in the forefront of supporting Ukraine. A £2.5 billion package there, which has been repeated under this Prime Minister, one of the first countries to get in there with the missiles and the tanks and the kind of military support that Ukraine needed. Also here within the UK, training thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and pilots to make sure that they're ready to prosecute the defence of their country. So we do take defence extremely seriously indeed.
Bit of fatigue, don't you think, especially in relation to what is happening in Ukraine and indeed in Gaza? And I just wonder what your own view is, based on what James Heappey, the outgoing Armed Forces Minister, said yesterday, that we are failing to prepare for war. Really alarming words from somebody who has served himself and, as I say, respected within the party as well, and backed by Ben Wallace.
Well, as I say, there are often calls for more defence, and it certainly is true that we live in a more precarious and dangerous world. You think about everybody from Iran to North Korea to China to Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, and so on. This is a very uncertain time, probably the most dangerous time, certainly since the end of the Cold War. And that has been reflected in the security review that we conducted recently. It's reflected in the fact that we are upping our aspiration in terms of defence spending, and doing that collectively, of course, as part of NATO. And you see many countries such as Poland and Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, etc., announcing quite significant, Germany, significant increases in their spend, because we collectively recognise there is a heightened level of risk going forward.
Now, you've been speaking about the amount of money going into pensions. That's coming out of taxes. The amount of money going into defence, that's coming out of taxes. There have been billions more going into the NHS, that's coming out of taxes. Is it no surprise, therefore, that the tax burden, despite the national insurance cuts that we've seen in the last two fiscal events, is still predicted to rise over the next 4 years due to these frozen tax thresholds? More people being dragged into paying tax and more people paying more tax, despite the little cuts.
Well, the level of the tax burden in the UK is about mid-pack when it comes to other European nations. That's broadly where we are. But you're right, it has been rising. But it would be surprising, in a way, if it hadn't been, because people very quickly forget the fact that we had a COVID pandemic, we had to support the economy. The economy shrank by over 10% overnight, the biggest shrinkage in the size of the economy since the Great Frost of 1709. We then had a massive amount of inflation imported as a result of the Ukraine-Russian war and the increase in energy prices. And we took the decision, I think it was the right one, the Prime Minister particularly took this decision to support people, particularly the most vulnerable, through that difficult period. So that meant cost of living payments to millions of low-income households. It meant the energy price cap that we brought in to support people.
The Prime Minister says now
winter.
That he wants to turn the corner and start reducing that tax burden. Wouldn't it make sense to unfreeze those thresholds?
Yeah, well, those are matters for the Chancellor as to what he does going forward, but we've made it very clear, and in fact, judge us by our actions. What I was going to go on to say is that there was a price that came with all that support, and we had to put taxes up to cover that. But taxes are now coming down. Now, the national insurance cuts, which also have just come in along the second instalment of those, mean that for the average worker on £35,400 a year, they're going to be £900 a year better off as a consequence of this. And in fact, you mentioned the threshold freezes. If you look at that average worker, the marginal tax that they're paying after taking into account both the national insurance cut and the threshold freeze is the lowest marginal rate of tax they'll be paying since 1975. So it does actually depend where you are on the income spectrum as to how these
But as you know, lots of nurses and teachers and people who you wouldn't say are well paid are being dragged into those higher thresholds. We can argue about that, but I just want a final thought from you about William Wragg. He remains Vice-Chancellor of the powerful 1922 Backbench Committee. Of course, we all know about the honey trap scandal he's been involved in, particularly relating to backbench MPs. Do you think that he should lose that position? We hear Andrea Jenkins this morning, Dame Andrea Jenkins, I should add, the latest fellow Tory to say that his actions are unforgivable. Should he step down?
Well, I think your question is about his role and position in the 1922 committee, and I think it's important for your viewers to understand something here, which is that that committee is a backbench committee, which in effect is there to hold the government and ministers like myself to account. So I think on that basis, it wouldn't be right for me to start trying to advise in public the 1922
position
committee
is,
as to
do you think that
what
he has
action
put
it
his credibility
may or may not take.
OK, but I mean, you can see that his credibility is undermined by this. Would you step down in that position?
Well, I think it's a very all situations are different, and thankfully I'm not in that situation. But he has clearly done something that is exceptionally inappropriate and ill-advised. He has apologised for that, and I think that the overarching lesson for all of us in public life here is to proceed with great caution in these circumstances, and he's clearly got himself into a very difficult situation and then did things as a consequence of that which have impacted other people, which is deeply unsatisfactory, which is why he's apologised.
OK. Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, thanks for your time this morning.
Well, let's get your weather updates now with Marco Petagna.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm afraid we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing further spells of rain at times, coupled with quite strong winds at times too. Back to the detail for today, and we've got some bright weather across the south and east of the UK during the morning, but notice showery bursts of rain out towards the west, up across parts of northern England, and further showery bursts of rain will work their way up from the south into many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, after a bright start, will see some rain later, whereas Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine throughout the day, just a bit of patchy rain across the far south later on. Feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine in the north, up to 12 degrees, but the warmest temperatures generally down towards the southeast, coupled with that wind and rain though. As for the evening and during the overnight period, we'll see some clearer spells developing across the southeast of the UK for a time, and some clear spells towards the far northwest, but on the whole, low pressure will be dominating the scene, giving a lot of wind and rain, particularly windy down towards the southwest, and wherever you are, with that wind and rain around, it will stay quite mild for the time of year. As for Tuesday, well, another very unsettled day on the cards across the UK. Low pressure sitting right across the UK, bringing spells of wind and rain. The wettest weather generally likely up towards southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Could see up to 2 inches of rain in places here. And the windiest weather generally out towards the west and across some southern coasts of England, with gales in places here at times. Temperatures generally cooler than over the last few days, up to 12 or 13 Celsius at best.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Buses replaced trains between Barrow-in-Furness and Lancaster for emergency engineering works after an earlier derailment. In Lancashire, the A674 is closed in both directions along Preston Old Road in Blackburn after a fire. There's disruption to a number of train services today because of industrial action, with buses replacing trains between Leamington Spa and Nuneaton. C2C train services aren't running into and out of Fenchurch Street Station in London. There's no service on the Gatwick Express, no trains running on the Isle of Wight, and train services are also suspended between Plymouth and Gunnerslake because of a points failure. In Cornwall, there's a report of an accident on the A388 at Launceston, and all Skillonian ferry services are being cancelled at the moment between Penzance and the Isles of Scilly because of high winds. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Monday, the 8th of April.
You are very welcome to breakfast with me, Isabel Webster, and you'll notice I'm sitting beside the very lovely Tom Harwood this morning, in for Eamonn Holmes, who I'm told is in the building. So he's very nearly here, with no thanks to Storm Kathleen, which has caused us unending headaches over the weekend.
But it's been lovely to sit in with you for the first hour and a bit. Yes.
So leading for us this morning, we have a boost for pensioners, as we've just been hearing. The government state pension rise and a raft of other benefits are set to be introduced from today.
And is the UK prepared for war? Well, after warnings from outgoing Armed Services Minister James Heappey over the weekend, we'll be speaking to the former head of the British Army, Lord Deterrence, in just a moment.
North America is set to be dazzled by a solar eclipse later today, but there are spots a bit closer to home where you can get a glimpse.
And police have launched a manhunt after the fatal stabbing of a woman in Bradford on Saturday. We'll have all the latest on that very shortly.
And our debate at 7:20 amid a rise in Brits seeking risky overseas medical treatment, we'll be debating whether it's better to seek help at home or abroad.
Hello, good morning. We'll see some bright weather around today, but things will generally be turning more unsettled as we go through the day, particularly across parts of England and Wales. I'll have all the details later.
Now, a little change here on GB News this morning. We know that you love to get in touch and we love to read what you think about all of the stories that we talk about here. But there's a new way to do so. You can now send us your views and post your comments, even reply to other comments. You can visit gbnews.com/your say to get involved in the conversation.
Yeah, and you'll find that obviously via our website. If you are a GB News member as well, you will get priority on your comments there. And of course, you will find a whole host of other things on our website whilst you're there. Don't worry, we're still looking at everything you say and really pleased and welcoming all of your comments. A little bit of a change though, and it's just settling in this week. So we look forward to getting familiar with it ourselves as well, remembering the new call out. But it is just a reminder one more time, gbnews.com/your say.
Well, let's get to one of the biggest stories today. The outgoing Defence Minister, James Heappey, has slammed the government's defence policy, arguing that some in government are just hoping threats to the UK will simply go away.
Well, meanwhile, Heappey called on ministers to do more to get ready for conflict, saying the UK has failed to prepare for war.
Well, the former head of the British Army, Lord Deterrence, joins us now. Thank you so much for making the time for us this morning. Frankly, what are the risks that the United Kingdom potentially faces right now?
Well, I think the issue that James Heappey highlighted and Ben Wallace supported, and indeed Lord Sedwell also had an interesting piece in The Independent yesterday. But what they're all pointing up, and many of us have been saying this for a while, is that looking at the situation in Europe, the security situation in Europe, with Russia's aggression against Ukraine being the predominant factor at the present moment, it makes sense for a country like ourselves to think about the worst, to prepare for the worst, to make sure that we're in a good place if the worst should happen. Now, none of us want the worst should happen, and by the worst, I mean getting involved in a war. And the issue that James Heappey was pointing out was that the Ministry of Defence alone was the only government department, he said, that was taking preparations for potential conflict seriously. And he highlighted the fact that a major exercise had been planned a little while ago, which all government departments are required or should have been required take part in to test the country's procedures for how to respond in the event of a major crisis and attack. And other government departments just failed to turn up. And he perfectly reasonably said that this actually indicated that we're not taking these things sufficiently seriously.
Yeah, and it sort of begs the question, doesn't it, whether we've learnt the lessons of COVID when we heard all of the sort of preparations for a pandemic had been almost sort of ignored for a while by successive governments, and here we are talking about all these threats around the world, and are the government making those preparations that we deserve as citizens? And to hear from you sharing those concerns, I suppose, adds weight to that. I mean, how alarmed should we be? Is this rectifiable? Do you think that the government's taking this seriously now? Do you think that Lord Cameron, as our Foreign Secretary, has a role to play in all of this as well?
Well, we'd be worried, we should be worried, if the government didn't respond to these criticisms and didn't rise to the challenge. Now, what this needs, and currently, without being unreasonable about it, it shows a failure of leadership. If there are potential crises, you mentioned COVID, and of course, that was something we had to struggle our way through. And leadership there was pretty iffy at times. But if you look at the worst outcome of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, if Russia should prevail against Ukraine, and then Russia should push against other NATO countries, we could find ourselves in a very serious set of circumstances here in this country. But what it needs is for number 10, the Prime Minister of the day, to absolutely crack the whip across government and say, right, back in the Cold War years, we had good plans in this country to know how we would respond in a crisis. We've got a well-constructed government control bunker. We need to exercise this. We need to get what's called the war book refreshed and sorted out again, and make sure that we're serving the people of our country properly by having right across government, right across all government departments, proper plans from central government down to local government to reassure the people that if the worst comes to the worst, we know how to respond. And part of that, of course, and you probably know what I'm going to say next, is we need to increase our spending on our defence. And that means increasing the defence budget from 2.2% through 2.5% to 3%. And some would even say, and I would echo that, going up to 4%, which is sort of where we were in the Cold War, to make sure that we are properly looking after the defence and the infrastructure of this country, to make sure that we can look after the people of this country should the worst come to the worst.
You mentioned the Cold War, and thank goodness it did not turn hot. Perhaps one of the reasons it didn't was this policy pursued by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher of peace through strength. The very fact of having the capability to fight a war, warding off the prospect of war itself. It seems like we've entered into a different paradigm now, whereby both major parties in the United Kingdom are almost pursuing the opposite policy, ignoring the need for a strong military. Would that be your assessment?
Tom, I think you described it perfectly well. The reason why the Cold War never turned hot was because we increased our defence capability, both nuclear and conventional capability, particularly during the 1980s, as you pointed quite correctly to the leadership of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, to the point that the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact realized that they couldn't compete, and indeed the Cold War ended satisfactorily. I'd also say we were spending between 4 and 5% of GDP at that time. And although that sounds like an awful lot of money, and I've made this point before, parallels with the 1930s are not unreasonable. In 1935, we spent less than 3% of GDP and tried to appease Hitler. When war broke out, because appeasement failed, in 1939, that had shot up to 18%. And in 1940, when we were fighting for our lives, it was 46%. That's the disastrous price of fighting a war. What we have to do is pay the premium to deter war. And I think that premium is currently now about 3 or 4% of GDP. That's what we should be rising up to. It needs leadership across the country to get the government to act cohesively. And I'm afraid whoever is Prime Minister this time next year needs to realise that there are serious issues on the international horizon That should be his or her top priority.
I'm so pleased you're on the programme because, I mean, I've quoted those articles that you're referring to ministers on this programme multiple times, these linkages that you made to sort of pre-Second World War and the Cold War as well, and they always come back. And in fact, we had Mel Stride, the Department for Work and Pension Secretary of State, a moment ago saying the exact same thing. We've got record spending in defence, higher than ever. We're spending more now than ever, higher than... And I just wanted to get your response to what, you know, when I give them your argument, that's what they come back at me with. What would you like to say in response to that?
Well, if you're just looking at the sort of the cash, then of course they're absolutely right. But 20 years ago, things were a lot cheaper. And now the price of everything has gone up. And the price of defence equipment has gone up. So to just rely on saying, well, 50 billion is the maximum we've ever spent in recent times, of course that is absolutely right. But you have to come back to the issue of proportion of GDP. We're spending 2.2% at the present moment. And I've already made the case that we bought peace through the Cold War at 4 to 5% of GDP. Those are the sort of figures we should be looking at. Now, of course, people can point to waste and to poor spending in defence procurement, and that is something that the government has got to bear down on. The Public Accounts Committee have criticised the MOD, and the Defence Select Committee have criticised the MOD. So the MOD can do better at the way it spends the money it's given. But the fact of the matter is the quantum, in proportionate terms, is not sufficient to guarantee the security that the people of this country deserve.
General Lord Sir Richard Dannett, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Now, police have named a suspect as the search continues for the man who stabbed a woman to death in broad daylight in Bradford city centre.
Yeah, West Yorkshire police detectives are searching for 25-year-old Habiba Massoum after they were called to the scene on Saturday afternoon following reports of an attack.
Well, the former Metropolitan Police detective, Peter Blexley, joins us now. Peter, this is a shocking case, not least the very brazen nature of it.
Yes, a 27-year-old woman pushing her baby stabbed to death in broad daylight, apparently in front of a number of witnesses who must, of course, been traumatised by these brutal events. But now the police find themselves with a two-pronged investigation. Number one, of course, to gather the evidence around this dreadful murder. That's vitally important. Forensics, witnesses, CCTV and the such like. And also this very much alive manhunt. Massoum is clearly on the run. He's got links to Chester, Burnley, Oldham. And of course, it's rather sadly ironic that this comes the week after a man who had evaded capture for 18 years for the murder of Sharon Beshinivsky in Bradford finally was brought to justice and convicted last week. I'm sure that the police here do not want another similar case where this man could potentially escape from the country, for example.
And Peter, we've all seen you on Hunted. Just bring us up to speed on what will be going on behind the scenes in a manhunt and what sort of tools are at your disposal and how hopeful you are that they'll be successful in this.
In 2024, technology will play a considerable part if he's believed to have access to any form of device, a phone, an iPad, a laptop, for example. That is so crucial in this day and age. It's the age of the digital detective. But there will also be very traditional type of policing methods, in so much as that they will be exploring his network. Where's he got contacts? Where's he got family? Who might be harbouring? And let me send out a very clear message to anybody who is foolish enough to feed him, clothe him, put a roof over his head, transport him anywhere, or in any other way, try to assist him. The police will hunt you down, and you may well find yourselves at some stage in the future in front of court for a very serious offence of assisting offender and possibly perverting the course of justice.
Well, Peter Blexley, thank you very much for talking us through that concerning case. And of course, that manhunt is still active.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And North America is set to be dazzled later today when a total eclipse sweeps the continent. But it won't be just Americans. Eagle-eyed Brits could also spot the eclipse across parts of the UK, including Belfast, Glasgow and Liverpool. Earlier, we spoke to the travel correspondent Simon Calder, who was in Montreal.
Are going to be placed in parts of Western United Kingdom where you will be able to see a partial eclipse towards sunset.
Now, rail passengers across Britain have been facing 4 days of travel chaos since Friday after a long-running row over drivers' pay and conditions. Train drivers at 16 rail companies are staging a fresh wave of strikes, with union members frustrated by not receiving a pay rise since 2019. GB News reporter Theo Chakomba has the latest from Waterloo Station.
Well, it's yet another day as thousands of commuters will be frustrated as there are more rail strikes today. 16 companies have been taking strike action since Friday last week. And ASLEF union members, which represents train drivers, they rejected an offer April 2023, which would have seen a 4% pay rise for 2 years in a row. But today they are striking, affecting trains such as Greater Anglia, Southern Eastern Rail and more. And there's set to be disruption throughout the day. But good news for people using trains in London, as London Underground strike action, which was meant to be today, has been cancelled.
And a British man nicknamed Hardest Geezer has become the first person to run the length of Africa. Russell Cook from Worthing in West Sussex crossed the finish line in Tunisia after running for 352 days. The 27-year-old said he'd previously struggled with his mental health, gambling and drinking, and wanted to make a difference.
That's what I should have done. I should have ran the length of Britain.
It would have been easier.
Yeah, instead of that.
Well, it's great to see you, Eamonn.
Hey,
thanks for
better
coming
to
in.
see you, mate, because you come in and held the fort this morning,
What a
which was
shocker,
good.
Eamonn. So what happened? You were at the airport by 11 o'clock yesterday morning?
And didn't get home till 11:30 last night.
Ridiculous.
But it was just one of those things, the weather situation. A lot of people would be through it, and the further north you were more likely to be affected. So Edinburgh, Newcastle, Glasgow, Aberdeen,
nightmare,
all affected by it. But well, we're here.
Well, you made it. You made it.
I get it.
Cracking. Yeah, okay. Get into your seat. Well, in the meantime, let's check the latest weather. Let's hope it's not too stormy. Here's Marco.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm afraid we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing further spells of rain at times, coupled with quite strong winds at times too. Back to the detail for today, and we've got some bright weather across the south and east of the UK during the morning, but notice showery bursts of rain out towards the west, up across parts of northern England, and further showery bursts of rain will work their way up from the south into many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, after a bright start, will see some rain later, whereas Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine throughout the day, just a bit of patchy rain across the far south later on. Feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine in the north, up to 12 degrees, but the warmest temperatures generally down towards the southeast, coupled with that wind and rain though. As for the evening and during the overnight period, we'll see some clearer spells developing across the southeast of the UK for a time, and some clear spells towards the far northwest, but on the whole, low pressure will be dominating the scene, giving a lot of wind and rain, particularly windy down towards the southwest, and wherever you are, with that wind and rain around, it will stay quite mild for the time of year. As for Tuesday, well, another very unsettled day on the cards across the UK. Low pressure sitting right across the UK, bringing spells of wind and rain. The wettest weather generally likely up towards the southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Could see up to 2 inches of rain in places here. And the windiest weather generally out towards the west and across some southern coasts of England, with gales in places here at times. Temperatures generally cooler than over the last few days, up to 12 or 13 Celsius at best.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
One one of the interesting things at the airport last night was to see the amount of people that have trackers now on their luggage.
Oh, right.
Because they just simply don't trust airline
Have you invested in one of those yet?
No, but I would.
Did your luggage find its way back with you?
Yeah, it was. I had no difficulty, but people who was with Laurie and Siobhan, who are heading off to, where are they going? Cove and Cork on a cruise.
Oh, brilliant.
Out of Portsmouth. And they flew down and they had trackers on their luggage, so they knew exactly where it was, and you don't get lost.
Yeah, you see, technology can be brilliant when you need it to.
Sam, but why am I a bit hoarse this morning?
I don't know, it's all the stress of air conditioning and flights and people getting irate in the airport.
No, I think everybody was good. Everybody could see that it was just an act of nature and that the staff were doing their best. Yeah. So the airplane came in to Glasgow and it couldn't land. It had 2 attempts at landing and then fuel was an issue, so they went down to Manchester.
Oh, no.
And
what was takeoff like?
There.
Was it windy when you were trying to get...
No, by the time we went last night, which was 9:15, I think we left, and it was supposed to be 1 o'clock in the afternoon originally, but... It was all fine.
Right.
The only bad bit was the runway at Heathrow, just coming down to that, and it was a bit of a.
You see, that's the thing. It's not like when they said leaves on the line with the railway, and you think, yeah. You know, when there's too much wind, I'm actually quite happy not to fly. If you're saying it's not safe to take off, I'll take your advice.
No, I agree with
It's not funny when being thrown about.
Yeah.
Speaking of cruises, though, you mentioned a cruise there. You should wait, Eamonn, until you see what our giveaway is this time round.
It's 10,000 quid in cash. It's a cruise worth 10,000 quid, isn't it?
Greece.
There's these holiday giveaways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things with it.
Unbelievable.
And goodness knows what. You put it all together, and it is GB News' Great British Giveaway.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We've got a new way for folk to get in touch this morning.
Yes, it's all change, and I haven't quite memorised what it's called. It's gbnews.com/your-say. We've just about got the other one, haven't we? And it's changed. What's great about this, though, Eamonn, is people get their comments all through our website, but everyone can interact with each other, and they can have arguments with each other, they can back each other up. So there's a lot of that going on this morning. Good point, Jeanette. Well done, Paul. And they're all getting involved, and that's what is the essence, really, of GB News, is our little community. Please don't despair if you haven't found us yet. It's going to take a few days to get used to the new system, but we still very much want your
What do you mean
views
if you
in the
haven't
programme.
found us yet? I spent all weekend, I was in Glasgow, and the amount of people in Glasgow who watch this programme.
No, I mean, they found the programme, but I mean, haven't found the new Your Say section. But yes, we've got lots of viewers up there.
Lots
Good
of
to
viewers,
hear.
lots of viewers, yeah,
Welcome
everything
aboard.
very good. So if you were delayed by winds yesterday, if you had trouble with the wind, let us know, and we'll interact and see where you were and what was happening. It was quite interesting because all the planes arrived at the same time, then being delayed in Aberdeen and Newcastle and whatever, and then they all came down into Heathrow at the same time last night.
Oh, right.
Because it was a sort of break while the wind died down, whatever. Anyway, up next we're talking about what? All sorts of surgeries abroad.
Yeah, a double whammy. You can go to Turkey for a nose job and your veterinary surgery as part of a package now. We're talking about whether or not you should go abroad for your treatments at all.
But these aren't essential treatments. These are like luxurious treatments.
Yeah.
Tweakments,
you know,
and things
what people
like
do
that.
to make themselves look better. But
Well,
I don't know what they're doing
they've
to their
done
pets.
well. They've done well. It all looks good. We're talking about that next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Medical matters now, delayed appointments, waiting lists, lack of staff, strike action, you put it all together and you get trouble for the NHS.
Yes, so now desperate patients have been forced to ditch the NHS and seek treatment abroad, which is not only pricey, but also, well, we're asking this morning if it can be fully trusted.
But I think a lot of people they're jumping the queue, they're getting things done differently. So say it's a hip replacement or whatever, they feel that they can get it done much quicker, but they'll have to pay for it, or their insurance will have to cover it as well. Two doctors will join us now. The founder of the Ishu Clinic, Dr. Tijian Ishu, and Dr. Basha Mukherjee as well. Yeah, I need an operation to get both those names out. Hey, absolutely. Very nice to see you both. Anyway, how are you seeing the way people are thinking and what's happening?
I'll let the lovely lady go first.
I think we have to think about the patient's perspective as well. From my experience, the patients I've seen come in to see me who've had surgeries, procedures done abroad, they simply are tired of waiting. And for somebody, it could just be a case of, do they stay off work and wait for their knee operation for several months? Do they lose function altogether? Or do they go on a holiday, essentially, and get a procedure done at the same time? And I think we also need to question, where does our bias come from about thinking that practices done abroad are not trustworthy? Is it based around xenophobia? Because we are, in the NHS, getting doctors and employing doctors and clinicians from these countries as well. So I don't know.
Well, Dr. Mukherjee, we do hear the horror stories, don't we, though? I mean, some places in Turkey having botched procedures, and in fact, practitioners here in the UK, and perhaps you're one of them, Dr. Esho, warning about some doctors overseas perhaps not regulated in the same way, perhaps offering cut-rate prices, but giving cut-rate services as well. I mean, what's your view? Can we trust overseas clinicians?
Yeah, so I agree with Dr. Mukherjee here in terms of the fact that we can't just say we're the only place that has great doctors and great medical care. We're one of the best free health services in the world, but there are expertise all across the world. So I think she's completely correct with that. What my concern comes with when the shopping for expertise comes based on price and not how good someone is or where that is. This is where we see the situations where things go wrong, because when something is very, very cheap, often or not, it's because there are things that have been left out that will be compromising the safety of the patient, whether that's the experience of the practitioner, the circumstances of the follow-up, all of these things come into play. So for me, surgical tourism or medical tourism is a need because the system is overrun.
But they're not leaving out an anaesthetist or something like that, are they?
It could be. It could be in certain circumstances where we've seen that people should undergo a general anaesthetic, that they're going through a more risky operation under local anaesthetic just because it's a much cheaper way of doing it, or using sedation where they could run into problems and more stress on the body. So again, they can have these procedures done, but it's really important that are following the best expertise.
Dr. Mukherjee, it's the ones that are more visual, so, you know, people can't really see whether a hip operation's right or wrong, whatever it is, but like say dentistry.
Oh yeah, you see
and you get your teeth, and
they come back with daggers instead.
Yeah, they're sticking out to the left, they're sticking out to the right.
Procedures done. I've actually had dental procedures done in Turkey, and I must say that yes, I do think that shopping around for the cheapest option might not necessarily be the most. It might not be the best way to do it. But there are research websites where you can go on to see government-regulated companies, dental companies, and medical companies, and there is more awareness about this as well. And actually, we have to understand that just because a procedure is being charged for more in the country does not necessarily mean it's better either. I have definitely encountered private practitioners in this country who might have obtained their injecting license from a 2-day course, and they're going around doing injections. I know a lash artist who just went and did a 2-day course and started injecting Botox in people's faces and various other areas. And we are also seeing those complications come into the NHS as well.
Well, also,
So,
I mean,
think
is it just private clinicians, as you say, perhaps sort of underqualified? But, you know, when you think of all the pressure that the NHS is under, whether that's through strikes, whether that's through, you know, just too much demand in A&E or whatever it might be. I mean, Linda's just got in touch via Your Say on our new portal on the website saying, I actually think the British NHS is no longer fit for purpose. I'd question whether it's safer in the UK. Is that a fair point, Dr. Esho?
I think it's a bit of a harsh comment. I understand the frustrations. You know, like I said, we've got one of the best free healthcare services in the world, but that comes at a cost because the growing need, the growing expectation of what it's supposed to provide, the growing ages of the patients there and the demand, you know, it's very, very difficult. Myself, I had both parents with cancer. My dad unfortunately passed away a year ago. And, you know, the service and the care that they got by the NHS, both of them, was phenomenal. My son, we almost lost him in COVID at 15 months old, and I don't believe he would have got that care elsewhere. So it does a lot, but sometimes we do focus on the negative.
Let me ask you, why has Turkey come to prominence in all of this? I mean, we're not hearing people are going to America to get these treatments done, or they're going to Iceland or whatever, but we're hearing Turkey all the time. Why have they got availability on this?
I think it's not just availability, but practicality. You know, to get to Turkey is much easier than to get to the States. And so then again, coming into cost, you know, I've seen packages where for £500, someone has a hotel, flights return, their procedure and come back.
It's not France, as Eamonn says, even, or Spain. It does seem to be Turkey. And I understand for hair transplants, it's really popular because it's a huge thing in Turkey. Baldness is kind of like...
suggesting the doctor should be
I'm not making...
booking a ticket?
Sorry, no, my brother is bald and proud. I don't have a problem with baldness.
I'm too far gone.
In Turkey, people apparently do have a problem with baldness, and at some of the clinics, they do 40 to 50 procedures per day. So they are actually international experts at it.
And are they sort of slightly phobic about baldness?
They're phobic. They love a hairy man, so they have the big moustaches. They're all about the full head of hair, and that's linked to kind of success in the mindset there, which is why I think Turkey's come to prominence for that. But I don't know about teeth. Maybe they'd like a $1 million smile as well, or whatever it might be. But that's in answer to that question. You might
I think there's a big awareness and targeting in campaigns for places like Turkey. You know, they're one of the first places, or there are many other options, as you say. But when you look at surgical tourism, you look at salespeople that base themselves in the UK to help ship people to Turkey to have operation, it's a much more sophisticated operation. But with that, just as my colleague has said, in the UK, where we've seen problems with poor regulation, we're seeing a lot of that there. When there's a big growth point, then there needs to be regulation. And I think it's harder for the public to understand where it's safe than just my learned colleague there who had gone for her teeth. You know, we still need to do more. We are signposting and educating the public, particularly with Turkey, in terms of where there are great places to go to and what to look for. But I don't believe we are there yet. And opening that gateway just to say, look, abroad go, I think leaves, you know, the NHS will pick up the pieces in the end, because when these go wrong, as my colleagues have probably seen them working in A&E, where else do they go? You know, they come back here and we're not going to turn them away.
Well, go and see people like you guys. Thank goodness you're there. Thank you very much indeed. Just an interesting thing, the way the trend is going. Thank you for discussing it with us today. We've got to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed.
Coming up, pension boosts being introduced today. We spoke to the government about that, and we'll be talking all matters money. We've got a financial expert coming up round the bend. Stay with us here on Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Lancashire, the A674 is closed in both directions along Preston Old Road in Blackburn after a fire. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, the inside lanes closed northbound after an accident between junctions 10 and 11 from Luton Airport to the A505 Luton and Dunstable turn, causing queues. There are also southbound queues from junction 11A for the A5 north of Dunstable down to 11 because of roadworks. Now, there's widespread disruption to a number of train services today because of industrial action, with no service on a number of routes, and there's a reduced service on a number of other routes. Train services are also suspended between Plymouth and Gunnerslake because of a points failure, and Sclonian ferry services between Penzance and the Isles of Scilly being cancelled at the moment because of high winds. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Money, money, money. Here we are. We're into the new tax year. It's begun, but what does that mean for your bank account? Let's find out as we go to financial expert Jasmine Birtles with all of this. Jasmine, lovely to see you. What does this mean? A new tax year, by and large, if you're in a PAYE job, does it really affect you?
Well, in many ways it wouldn't, but right at the moment, the big change, if you like, is the cut in national insurance payments. So you should see a little bit of an improvement, in your pay packet, because you shouldn't be paying as much national insurance as before, assuming that you're not on a very high salary. If you're on a very high salary, you're likely not to see any difference in that. However, that good is rather offset a little by the fact that the tax thresholds, the threshold at which you start to pay income tax, are frozen. So if your money is going up, if you're lucky enough to have been given a bit of a boost this year, this new tax year, your employer's been a bit generous, saying we're going to increase your salary, you will now be paying more tax, and more tax than you would have been paying if they had moved this threshold in line with wage increases, inflation, etc.
So I'm looking at all sorts of detail, and people are talking about what they're paying into pensions and various things like that. There is a big worry about AI, artificial intelligence scams. Paul says these AI scams are absolutely everywhere. How do we know that an offer is real?
It's a very good question, because, yes, I think AI is getting cleverer and cleverer. They can pretend to be all sorts. I mean, even before we had AI coming in, we had people, and we still have people, who are spending all day, every day, working on scams. So we are being scammed all the time. And boringly, I think we have to assume that if something is coming from someone we don't know, particularly if it has an attachment, I'm thinking about emails, particularly also texts, if it's someone we don't know, we have to assume first that it's a scam. We have to be more and more skeptical, which, as I say, is boring. It's much nicer to be trusting. It's much easier to be trusting. But sadly, we have to assume that it's a scam and then test out to see, maybe phone, if it seems to be coming from a friend, but it's a bit odd, phone them separately, or if you think it's your bank, phone your bank separately, just to see. You kind of have to triangulate things nowadays, try different ways to see if it is real or not.
Sean says new pension rules today are great, but I'm still paying more than ever. What can us oldies do to keep ourselves afloat? Karen says my husband is due to retire next year, but says it's hardly enough to live off. He's thinking of staying in work until he's 70. And this is it. A lot of people, they thought they'd be retired at 55 or 60, and they realise they're having to work much longer than they would have thought. Do you have one bit of general advice to the population at large there about what they should be doing, how they should be approaching this as we go into this new tax year?
Yes, it is tough because, as you know, one of the changes for this new tax year is that the state pension has gone up by an inflation-busting 8.5%. But even there, in this country, we have very low state pension levels compared to other countries in Europe. So 8.5% of something low is still relatively low. And I say to everybody in work, whatever you're putting away for your future, put more in because we're still going to need more. I think working longer is a good idea. Not everybody can, but if you can, even if it's just part-time, I would do it partly because, frankly, it keeps you in life, it keeps you going, gives you more of a reason to get up. But also, of course, it does mean that you are bringing in extra cash. And if you are working when you are retired, you don't have to pay national insurance. Now, that's not a major benefit, but it's a bit, it's a bit of a help.
It all adds up.
Yes, it all adds up.
It all adds up. Jasmine.
Ticking over as well, isn't it? That's the key, is just keeping active. Thank you, Jasmine. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Jasmine. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Eamonn. Great to see you both.
Thank you.
You too. Yeah, just got to keep working, Eamonn. That's the moral of the story, isn't it?
That is the moral.
We can never stop.
When I was younger and people would say, about saving a pension and, save, I was never good at saving. And I always thought, well, I want my car now. I don't want to save and get one in 15 years or whatever it is, or I want this house or I want that.
Yeah.
But then as you get older, you realise...
Well, there is a time when you do want to put your feet up. So what age you want to do that at, that's the big question. And whether or not you can afford to do it when you do want to, and let's hope we all can.
We'll be talking the big stories in the papers next. Dawn and Lewis Oakley back with that right after this.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan Tonight, weekends from 9 p.m.
We've got a problem in this country and it smells like you-know-what, because it is you-know-what. It's all throughout our waterways. They're absolutely full of it. You'd think in the 6th richest nation you could manage basic sanitation, but in 2024 in the UK, you'd be wrong. And it's so bad that this weekend's boat race was affected by the amount of E. coli in the Thames. I know what you're thinking. When will these kids who go to Oxford and Cambridge universities get a break in life? But it is an embarrassment. We can't hold an event on our rivers now. The rowers were given safety advice before the race that they should avoid getting any splashed water in their mouths during a rowing race. You might as well tell them to try not to rush. Leonard Jenkins of the Oxford men's team said it would be a lot nicer if there wasn't as much poo in the water. How terrible that needs to be said. The only time that would be worse is if you read that in a TripAdvisor review of a cafe. On Wednesday, Environment Agency figures revealed raw sewage spills doubled last year in England to 3.6 million hours of spills compared with 1.75 million hours in 2022. I was shocked that it happens so much we have to measure poos by the hour. To put that in context that you might understand, an hour of poo is about 30 trips for a woman and about 2 for a man. This is because our water systems get overwhelmed when they get a lot of rain. Hello, have you met the UK before? Rain is pretty much our thing. Sewage is spilled into the waterways to prevent the system backing up. In a statement issued before the race, Thames Water said, "We have experienced higher than average long-term rainfall across London." Yeah, how can you have higher than average long-term rainfall? If it's long-term, it increases the average. Do the math, step up and learn to cope with it.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lewis and Dawn are back again to look at stories making the news. And Lewis, we just want to say, Isabel and I often talk about, people who are punished and they're sent to prison and whatever. And we said, well, why aren't they doing something? And my particular gripe is litter on motorways and slip roads and everywhere. This country is filthy, absolutely filthy. And it's caused by people who just throw stuff out of their car. Now, my point is, why aren't prisoners passing their day in an orange jumpsuit or whatever it is, picking a lot of this stuff up once, twice, 3 times a week?
Well, I agree. I think that we should, we've got all of those people there. They may as well do something productive and help us clean up our very messy country. But of the ones that are being given community service, apparently 280,000 hours of punishment has been written off in the last year.
Right, so they get the punishment, then someone comes along and says, I haven't really got time to do this, let's just forget it.
Well, I think it's a classic case. So, to be fair, some of them die and are deported, but I think that's probably a small
we'll write that off
this.
then.
So we can write that off. If you die, fair enough.
We'll accept the dead ones.
Yeah. But I think a lot of them, it sounds like they just kick the can down the road. Maybe they've got a sick cat and then they've got a sick dog until it kind of expires, which is outrageous because I do think all we ever hear about with crime and punishment in this country is, oh, the police can't convict anyone, they don't even investigate burglaries anymore. So you've finally found someone, you've finally given them the conviction, you've said, look, prison's not for you, but we want you to do some good in the community, clean up the streets. And that's not even being enforced. It just makes you think, what's the point?
Just to explain, 280,000 hours of punishment equates to 30 years of work. Now, if you think how much work you've done in the last 30 years, and that's being written off. And we were saying, I think of Boy George when I think of community service, big high-profile person out there. What was he doing? Cleaning, scrubbing the streets?
In an orange jumpsuit.
That's what I want to see. If people's having their sentences reduced and been given community service instead, I want to see them.
I don't think I've ever
punished.
seen anyone doing community service.
I agree with you. But you know what I have seen? I was just looking at you there, and those new glasses you've
Well, they're for reading. I don't need them for the auto cue, but I do need them for the papers, and they are controversial. You may hate them, but I do need a bit of help.
They're making me go all funny.
Are they?
Yes, they're all...
There we go.
Very good.
Well, just because they're so thick. It's like,
They make you look very
No, you look very good.
that's
But
good.
you are intelligent.
Anything that helps is
Very
good.
Right, so what do we do about punishment? And should, if you do a crime or you're convicted of something or whatever, should you be made to work it out? I think we all think, yes, you should, but it's not happening.
Yeah, gbnews.com/yoursay for your view on that. Where should we go next, Dawn? Should we talk about... let's talk about Angela Rayner.
Let's talk about
The Daily
Angela
Mail, every day at the moment, seems to be leading on this story. We've got Wes Streeting on in just a few moments, and we will ask him about that. Is she becoming a liability now for Keir Starmer?
The thing is, she also gives balance to Keir Starmer. She's the working-class, gobby northern bird who...
He's working class. He'll tell you he's working class.
Well, who balances out the posh North London barrister side of things. So, in theory, I think they will keep her because she appeals to that demographic that maybe aren't engaging with the likes of Keir Starmer. And look, I know why the Mail are doing what they're doing. Obviously, we're running up to an election and they have to find some dirt on the Labour Party because they are a Tory supporting paper. But it does seem a little bit of a witch hunt going on here now. This is all based... this latest story is based on a social media post that Angela did several years ago now.
Before she was an MP?
Before she was an MP. And she happened to have a cushion in the... It's based on a cushion in the background that was in her husband's house rather than her house. So or the other way around, I can't remember which way. So, where was she living at the time? Now, this is... We're debating... We're shouting at a cushion. It's like, was this cushion in her house or in his house? And it does...
She'd be shouting at a cushion if it was a Tory, though.
Well, exactly that. That's the thing. So that is why the Mail are doing it day in, day out. And this has been going on since January now. But what gets me with it is Keir Starmer is happy that nothing has happened untoward without seeing any evidence. Now, my advisors have seen evidence. I trust Angela 100%. I don't think he does, but I think he is lumbered with her whether he wants to be or not.
I think she's very divisive. I personally find her very likeable. And I think she's very capable.
She's very funny.
But I think it's women in particular are threatened by her because she steps out of line and
I love her.
Puts her head above the parapet.
I think she's great. I think she's got personality.
But I'd like to get to the bottom of whatever's going on in this property thing, and you'll find out that it's been complained by from people who have dodged paying tax on millions rather than talking about what she said. I'm sort of like bored with it. I think no, I don't really care. Move on.
I think that's the thing. They can't make this stick because I think if a scandal is going to bring an MP down, it needs to be simple. This is quite tricky, and tax as well. And I think most British people just think, oh God, you know, you could easily be called out.
Easily. Let's talk about table manners. Generation Z, whatever. What? I don't know. How old is somebody?
I actually don't know.
I think
I'm clearly not in that bracket.
16 to 24 or something.
Okay, 16. If you're 16 to 24, you think that table manners are no longer relevant. Okay, so do we care if our elbows are on the table or you use your phone at the table? Or, matter of fact, most people don't even have a dining room anymore. Houses are built now because the dining room is seen to be irrelevant to what goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I've got young ones and I really want them to have really good table manners, and they have actually their own little table and they sit and eat together. So, you know, not in my house. I think that we should have table manners, and we want children to kind of learn how to interact. You're going to send them off into the world. They need to not make a show of themselves. But I will say, I think it's kind of what you're saying. Sometimes you don't have a dining room table, so how can you teach them?
Well, I tell you what, for instance, say this is a fork, right? Eating like that sort of annoys me. It's quite American, you know? So you can teach things like that.
Yeah, holding a knife and fork up like that, that's not great. But the way you're sitting,
I'm doing it on purpose, by the way.
But I mean, I'm a shocker for it. And I sit, whether we're eating, I might have a glass of wine, hold it in my hand, or I might lean across. And I have been called out by my children, who are 6 and 8, for having... And I'm like, for goodness sake, elbows on the table. Yeah. So I can't win, really. I'm not Gen Z, but I also don't mind the odd elbow on the table.
It's very interesting to see how sales of dining tables and chairs are going. I bet they're actually falling more than any other.
But are you offended yourself by elbows on the table?
I probably wouldn't. I tend to eat every meal over a keyboard, so I mean, I'm probably the world's worst.
In a restaurant, though, if somebody was doing that.
You should know how to place your knife and fork and your spoon, and you should know if you're called to a formal dining situation that you could pass yourself off in public. So I think there are basic things you have to do, but then what do I know?
The other thing here was about phones at the table, which I'm guilty of, but then sometimes, you know, you're trying to eat with your family, but you've got work to do, or you're waiting on a call. So I kind of feel like
there's
I'm
a
bad
match
example
on.
with that. Well, there's a
match and you've got to be watching it.
Come on, not at the table, boys.
But but you do see families in restaurants where mum and dad and 2 kids are all on their phones.
Okay.
Each other.
Guys, thank you both very much indeed. See you again in about 40 minutes' time. Now, the weather situation. It was very calm last night. Let's see if the wind is whipping up again and where that storm Catherine has got to. Margaret Patagna.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm afraid we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing further spells of rain at times, coupled with quite strong winds at times too. Back to the detail for today, and we've got some bright weather across the south and east of the UK during the morning, but notice showery bursts of rain out towards the west, up across parts of northern England, and further showery bursts of rain will work their way up from the south into many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, after a bright start, will see some rain later, whereas Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine throughout the day, just a bit of patchy rain across the far south later on. Feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine in the north, up to 12 degrees, but the warmest temperatures generally down towards the southeast, coupled with that wind and rain though. As for the evening and during the overnight period, we'll see some clearer spells developing across the southeast of the UK for a time, and some clear spells towards the far northwest, but on the whole, low pressure will be dominating the scene, giving a lot of wind and rain, particularly windy down towards the southwest, and wherever you are, with that wind and rain around, it will stay quite mild for the time of year. As for Tuesday, well, another very unsettled day on the cards across the UK. Low pressure sitting right across the UK, bringing spells of wind and rain. The wettest weather generally likely up towards southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Could see up to 2 inches of rain in places here. And the windiest weather generally out towards the west and across some southern coasts of England, with gales in places here at times. Temperatures generally cooler than over the last few days, up to 12 or 13 Celsius at best.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
the latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Lancashire, the A674 is closed in both directions along Preston Old Road in Blackburn after a fire. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, the inside lane's closed northbound. There's an accident between junctions 10 and 11 from Luton Airport to the A505 Luton and Dunstable turn, causing queues. In London, the A1 is blocked northbound by an accident at Hampstead. On the M27 in Hampshire, there's a lane closed eastbound where someone's broken down between junctions 8 and 9 towards Fareham, causing delays. There's disruption to a number of train services in England this morning because of industrial action. No service on some routes and a reduced service on a number of others. And train services are suspended between Plymouth and Gunnersley because of a points failure, and also between Liscard and Looe because of flooding. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
8 o'clock is the time on this Monday, the 8th of April. You're very welcome. Very nice to see you and have you on board. You're tuned into Breakfast online, on TV, and on what? On your device.
On your device.
On your device.
Yeah.
With Eamonn and Isabel.
Top story this morning, police have launched a manhunt after the fatal stabbing of a woman in Bradford on Saturday. We'll be keeping you in touch throughout the morning.
A boost for pensioners as the government's state pension rise and a raft of other benefits are set to be introduced from today.
Very high compared to what we had under the last Labour government, and many of your viewers may remember the 75 pence increase that occurred to the state pension under Gordon Brown, and we had very high levels of pensioner poverty under the last Labour government.
Yes, good news for senior citizens today, but are you beginning to feel better off, and do you think it will make you more likely to vote Conservative in the upcoming election?
Meanwhile, Labour have pledged to digitise NHS records in a bid to prevent future disease outbreaks amongst children. We'll be talking to the Shadow Health Minister, Wes Streeting, in just a moment.
North America set to be, well, dazzled's hardly the word, but set to go into the dark by a solar eclipse today. But there are spots a bit closer to home where apparently you can get a glimpse of all of this. I forget what I've seen or what I haven't seen as regards eclipses, but...
It's totally eclipsed you.
Yes, yeah, totally, yeah. But anyway, there we are, very good.
Let's take a look at the forecast.
Hello, good morning. We'll see some bright weather around today, but things will generally be turning more unsettled as we go through the day, particularly across parts of England and Wales. I'll have all the details later.
You know, yesterday being, I was going to say stranded in Glasgow airport, but because of the high winds, but a nice place to be. And the thing about Scottish people, so very, very friendly, and everybody, it was amazing to see how important the Old Firm game was to people yesterday. People had to see that game. Everybody was talking about it. You would get into a taxi, you'd be in a restaurant, you up for the game, Eamonn, you up for the game? Just, that was so important to people, so it was interesting
nice
to hear and see that.
You feel very at home in the Glasgow community. It's very similar to Belfast, I presume.
But people were, even if they didn't know, we didn't know each other. And by the end of the day, everybody was best friends. Everybody was the people you met, and all very good, very, very interesting. So that sort of dragged everybody together. So we're going to talk today about pensions.
Well, actually, first of all, we're going to tail off and speak to Wes Streeting, the Shadow Secretary of State for Health, who joined us a little bit earlier than expected, but delighted to see. Good morning. And I see you're standing in front of some emergency care there. They're making headlines this morning, front of the Times, the rise of the 24-hour wait for a bed in A&E. How would Labour change the way A&E is coping at the moment?
Well, the reason why we've got such pressure in A&E is because of the wider system pressures in the NHS. Because people can't get a GP appointment, for example, that would cost 40 quid for the NHS, they end up in A&E departments like the one behind me here in Ashfield, which costs around £400 per head. Because of delayed discharges from hospital beds, people are waiting longer in those emergency departments than they should because beds aren't available. And why is that? Because we don't have the social care we need and the support in the community to get people discharged from hospital, which is worse for them and also more expensive than the taxpayer. And that's why today in the Sun newspaper, I've made an argument that of course we know that the NHS could do with investment, but under a Labour government, all of that extra investment would be linked to reform, because unless we change the way that the NHS does things, we'll end up being back in the position of this government where Rishi Sunak boasts that he's spending more money on the NHS than ever before at the same time as the NHS is going through the worst crisis in its history. And personally, I don't think that spending vast amounts of taxpayers' money and getting really bad outcomes for patients and a bad service for our country is anything to boast about. And that's why Labour, the party that created the NHS, and the party that has a much better record on the NHS, is the party that's well placed to take the NHS from its worst crisis in history to get it back on its feet and make sure it's fit for the future.
But Wes, what about the way we do things as well, and can we help ourselves? Now, you're talking about something today which I find very interesting because, you know, I'm not now at an age where my kids are growing up and whatever. I don't know if I'm at risk from this myself, but measles. Measles is something that you want to talk about today. Why is that?
Well, believe it or not, I mean, this is another just extraordinary thing about where we are now in our country. We were a measles-free country, but for the last 7 years, the number of people taking up the MMR vaccine has been going down. And so measles is now a feature of our country once again. And I think we can almost be too complacent about this. Because we got rid of measles for a long time, we forget that measles can be a killer. And that's why we want to make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing. New parents will be aware, in fact, some not so new parents who probably, if they had a rummage around the kitchen drawer or, you know, in a cupboard somewhere, would find their children's red book. This is the red book that's given to all newborns, and it's meant to be children's health records, and it's meant to record things like their immunisations and vaccines and all of those important parts of early years children's healthcare. But these are still paper-based in the 21st century, and I think this is crazy. What we're proposing to do is digitise the Red Book, saving £2 million a year that's currently spent on printing these Red Books, but even more importantly, making it easy for parents to access those children's records, and also making it really easy for the NHS to send parents reminders to say, you know, you haven't had your second MMR jab, or you're overdue a health check, whatever it might be, to make sure that we get the basics right first time. Because if we don't get the basics right first time, we end up paying a much heavier price down the line. And I'm afraid this is the story of the NHS today. One of the reasons it's under massive pressure is because people haven't taken enough control of their own healthcare, and we end up putting a greater pressure on the NHS. So we've all got to do our bit to keep ourselves fit and active and healthy.
Yeah, look, most people, I think, would agree that it's a great idea if it gets more kids immunised against things like measles, as you say, a big killer, and really important to take it seriously. But I mean, as someone whose kids have read books, I don't have a problem with using those. And obviously, we don't want to be backward with technology. If we can digitise things, great. But is that going to come at a cost, and have you costed it? Because at the moment, we've moved house recently. Our GP just sends a sort of blanket text to everybody saying, make sure your immunisations are up to date. Please come and see us with your red book. That's working. That's reminding parents to come, get in touch. I mean, this would be a very expensive way of trying to get people through the door and get them those MMR vaccines, isn't it?
Well, I mean, there are some upfront costs of developing the NHS app, but it will save money over time. We're spending £2 million printing red books, and this is, I mean, I've given you one example in the red book, but take a look at the front page of the Telegraph the other day, where NHS leaders and government were complaining that Royal Mail failures are meaning that people are getting their letters too late, sometimes missing appointments because the letter telling them about the appointment didn't arrive in time. Now, I've got some sympathy with complaints about the service provided by Royal Mail, but actually, shouldn't the emphasis of the NHS be on reducing the amount of postage? Why aren't we digital by default? Of course, there will always be some people who don't, for whatever reason, have access to smartphones or Wi-Fi, or are just not comfortable with using technology in that way. Then by all means send those people a letter. But, you know, ask any GP, ask any patient, ask any consultant. The NHS runs on paper, and for years and years the Tories have promised action on this and failed to deliver. We have a technological transformation fund in the NHS. Let's put it to good use to reduce our reliance on paper, to reduce our reliance on stamps and Royal Mail, and to provide people with a modern service in a way that they access pretty much every other major service in their life at the moment, whether that's online shopping and retail or anything else we do by apps.
And Wes, just talking about your piece you've written in The Sun about how this is a service and not a shrine, and wanting to reform the NHS. You went on a delegation, didn't you, to Australia with a team just before Christmas, looking at what you can learn from their setup there. And my understanding is that you concluded where you have a private sector that is high functioning alongside a public sector, you actually get better health outcomes.
Well, it seems mad to me that we've got spare capacity in the private sector where we're not using it. And you've got a situation today where middle and upper class people who can pay to go private are being seen faster, getting diagnosed more quickly and treated more quickly, which is certainly better for their quality of life, but better for their outcomes. And then working class people are left behind because they're priced out of this two-tier system. Now, what I'm proposing is that a Labour government would use spare capacity in the private sector to bring down waiting lists faster, but no one will have to worry about the bill, and that service would be provided to working class people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access that capacity, but as they would if they walked into an NHS hospital, they will not get hit by a bill. Now, in some ways I'm not happy about this, because I think the NHS should have the staff, the equipment, the technology it needs without relying on the private sector, but I've got to deal with the world as it is after 14 years of Conservative government, not the world as I would wish it to be. And that's why I'm making that punchy argument in The Sun today. I've already had howls of outrage online from lots of middle-class lefties complaining about it, but they're not the ones who are waiting for months and months and months in pain and agony, and they are also the sort of people who quietly and privately would say, well, of course I had to pay for a scan, or my uncle or sister or brother had to pay for a scan. A lot of people in our country are not in a position to do that, and I would struggle to look someone in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay via the NHS for you to be seen faster because my principles are more important than your healthcare. So I'm making both a pragmatic argument that the capacity is there, but also a principle principled argument, which is I'm not prepared to see working class people priced out in this terrible two-tier system the Tories have created. And of course, in the longer term, it's Labour's ambition through workforce expansion, doubling the number of scanners, and building on our proud record as a party of making sure that in future the NHS has the staff, the equipment and the technology it needs to treat patients on time and to honour that founding principle of the NHS as a public service, free at the point of use there for us when we need it.
OK, Wes, thanks very much indeed. And you're outside to see it's springing into life this morning there. I suppose not that it ever goes off. Kingsmill Hospital in Mansfield. So thanks for your time this morning. We've got to leave it there. Thank you.
Well, let's get the analysis now of Catherine Forster, who joins us from Westminster. What did you make of all of that, Catherine?
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Wes Streeting, the shadow health secretary, seems able to say and propose things that perhaps the Conservatives feel that they can't. So increased use of the private sector. OK, he says it's not an ideal scenario, but he's happy to do that. Of course, that's something that happened a lot under New Labour, under Tony Blair. So it sounds like we're going back to that, but a real emphasis from him on the need for reform and saying things like, you know, unless we change the way the NHS does things, they're still going to have the same problems of funneling huge amounts of money, he said, to get bad outcomes. One of the things that struck me most was the figures he gave at the very beginning, saying, you know, it's £40 cost to the NHS for a GP appointment, but because people struggle to get those, they end up in A&E. The average cost of that is £400. Then if they need to be admitted, there's huge waits because of the beds not being available, largely because of a failure in social care. So enormous problems with the way that the NHS is currently functioning, despite the record funding. Of course, the demands go up and up and up. And indeed, he didn't mention this, but another thing, the front page of the Times today, really quite horrific figures for A&E waits, saying that last year over 150,000 people waited over 24 hours to be admitted through A&E. That's a tenfold increase on before the pandemic, saying that the majority of those are elderly or frail. Now, that's a dreadful situation to be in. And indeed, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine has estimated that over 250 people a week are dying as a result of delays in A&E. So certainly, the NHS, it's taking an ever-increasing share of taxpayers' money, but it is not working as it should. Wes Streeting has big plans, but of course, much easier to say things need to be done than actually do them. A huge challenge for whoever is in power after the next election.
Leave it there, Catherine. Thank you very much indeed. That's your political roundup. What's happening news-wise? Police have named a suspect in the search for the man who stabbed a woman to death in broad daylight in Bradford.
Yes, West Yorkshire police detectives are looking for 25-year-old Habiba Massoum after being called to the scene on Saturday afternoon following reports of an attack.
Well, earlier we spoke with former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley. This is what he had to say.
Yes, a 27-year-old woman pushing her baby stabbed to death in broad daylight, apparently in front of a number of witnesses who must, of course, been traumatised by these brutal events. But now the police find themselves with a two-pronged investigation. Number one, of course, to gather the evidence around this dreadful murder. That's vitally important. Forensics, witnesses, CCTV and the such like. And also this very much alive manhunt. Massoum is clearly on the run. He's got links to Chester, Burnley, Oldham. And of course, it's rather sadly ironic that this comes the week after a man who had evaded capture for 18 years for the murder of Sharon Beshinivsky in Bradford, finally was brought to justice and convicted last week. I'm sure that the police here do not want another similar case where this man could potentially escape from the country, for example.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. In North America is set to be wowed later today when a total eclipse is sweeping the continent. It won't just be Americans. Eagle-eyed Brits could also spot the eclipse across parts of the United Kingdom, including Belfast, Glasgow and Liverpool. Earlier, Simon Calder, the travel correspondent for The Eye, reported from Montreal.
are going to be places, parts of Western United Kingdom, where you will be able to see a partial eclipse towards sunset.
The Deputy Prime Minister has denied claims that Britain is failing to prepare for war. Oliver Dowden has defended the government after outgoing Armed Forces Minister James Heappey told the Telegraph newspaper, "We are unprepared." Earlier in the programme, we spoke with the former head of the British Army, Lord Richard Dannett.
They're all pointing up, and many of us have been saying this for a while, is that looking at the situation in Europe, the security situation in Europe, with Russia's aggression against Ukraine being the predominant factor at the present moment, it makes sense for a country like ourselves to think about the worst, to prepare for the worst, to make sure that we're in a good place if the worst should happen.
A British man, nicknamed the hardest geezer, has become one of the first to run the length of Africa. Russell Cook from Worthing in West Sussex crossed the finish line in Tunisia after running for 352 days. The 27-year-old said he'd previously struggled with his mental health, gambling and drinking, and wanted to make a difference. I couldn't do one marathon, let alone one every day or whatever it was that he did. He got mugged and he also got kidnapped, and he carried on doing that all for charity. I think in total, across another run that he's done from Asia to the UK, he's raised £750,000, something like that.
When you think of what he actually
phenomenal.
did, you know, it's incredible, absolutely amazing, doing all that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Have you seen that scoop thing?
I haven't. I really want to see.
This is on Netflix, isn't it? So,
Sam McAllister, the big scooper, the producer behind it all. You've seen our producer, our director Robin saying you've seen it. Let us know if at home you've seen it yet. Have you seen it?
No.
Right.
No,
on the
no.
to watch list.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll be on my tonight.
Oh right.
List.
Okay.
Yes, I think.
I look forward to the update tomorrow then.
Yeah. Let's get your weather update. Here's Marco with that.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm afraid we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing further spells of rain at times, coupled with quite strong winds at times too. Back to the detail for today, and we've got some bright weather across the south and east of the UK during the morning, but notice showery bursts of rain out towards the west, up across parts of northern England, and further showery bursts of rain will work their way up from the south into many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, after a bright start, will see some rain later, whereas Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine throughout the day, just a bit of patchy rain across the far south later on. Feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine in the north, up to 12 degrees, but the warmest temperatures generally down towards the southeast, coupled with that wind and rain though. As for the evening and during the overnight period, we'll see some clearer spells developing across the southeast of the UK for a time, and some clear spells towards the far northwest, but on the whole, low pressure will be dominating the scene, giving a lot of wind and rain, particularly windy down towards the southwest, and wherever you are, with that wind and rain around, it will stay quite mild for the time of year. As for Tuesday, well, another very unsettled day on the cards across the UK. Low pressure sitting right across the UK, bringing spells of wind and rain. The wettest weather generally likely up towards southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Could see up to 2 inches of rain in places here. And the windiest weather generally out towards the west and across some southern coasts of England, with gales in places here at times. Temperatures generally cooler than over the last few days, up to 12 or 13 Celsius at best.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, if that forecast didn't tickle your fancy, how about a trip to Greece? This is our biggest giveaway so far of the year. You could win £10,000 in cash, luxury travel items and...
Well, no, I'm just getting annoyed about this competition, so I am, yeah.
Because you can't participate.
No, well, see, if it was so big and so important and so fantastic, which it is, why aren't we on the cruise ship reporting live?
That's a good idea.
Yes.
We could be giving them their tickets at the gates.
Saying this is what you could get
to the cruise ship. That's a good idea. We'll pitch that in the meeting after the programme.
Pitch it. It should be a right. Should be a right.
Yeah, because that was it. The other part of it is £10,000 worth of cruise round the Greek islands. So it's in total worth £20,000, and here's how it could be yours.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
And as Eamonn just said to me, that's a very bespoke offering there, isn't it?
Bespoke.
Very bespoke, very bougie, very fancy.
Foodie. When I saw the prawns there with the olive oil going on them and things, that's what you want.
And the waiter.
But you know what?
The waiter.
You know what I noticed at the airport at the weekend? How do people have all this time on their hands to go on holidays? Places like Glasgow Airport, car park you couldn't get parked in it.
Easter holidays,
packed.
school holidays.
Yes, I forgot about
yeah.
See, now my kids I have no kids at school,
You're out the
so
loop.
I forget that that's all happening.
Yeah.
There you go. But anyway, up next we're talking about French soldiers in Buckingham Palace. Find out why after this.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
The big thing here, Tom, is it actually even credible or possible that by 2030 we're going to have carbon
If we wanted
neutral?
to do it, is it an engineering possibility? Yes. Could we do it if we wanted to? Yes, we could. But so far, we're not on course to doing it. This government has not done a particularly good job of doing what we could do if we set our mind to it. The question remains to be seen whether a Labour government would do better.
You see, I wonder whether the only way you could even get anywhere near this is just to import more energy. And when we import stuff, we say, there's no carbon dioxide emissions. So really, I just wonder, and it's a bit like steel making and many other arguments, aren't we just conning ourselves?
Well, I don't think we're conning ourselves. I think we're not putting in the effort we need to get to where we say we want to get to. And, you know, we can do this stupidly or we can do it smartly. And you and I have talked before about, well, if you build nuclear power stations, that's not a very smart way to do it. If you insulate
Well, you say that. Yeah, go on.
Well, you didn't disagree with me, as I recall.
My worry was...
Maybe changing your mind. You're allowed to do that.
Look, nuclear's fine, but we ain't going to have it by 2030.
No, that's absolutely true. We certainly can agree about that. The key real thing is, what can you do fastest and quickest that will drive people's bills down soonest? And that, for an incoming Labour government, driving bills down and incomes up will be their core priorities. So what can you do? Well, the first thing you're going to do is make every single building in this country leak tight, because we've got the... Sorry?
New build.
No, every single building. New buildings, all the buildings we've got, they should be critical national infrastructure. They're the leakiest buildings in Europe. That really reduces our competitiveness. I'm talking about not just homes, I'm also talking about all of our small and medium-sized enterprises where growth is going to come from.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christies. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end. Patrick Christies tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
See, you're looking at your calendar today and you're saying it is Monday, April the, what is that, 8th today? Is it? Yeah. And you're saying, what is today? I woke up this morning and I said, do you know what today is? Today is 120 years since the official alliance between Britain and France.
The Entente Cordiale.
See, I just on
You
top
love
of my
your history.
head. Just knew it straight away.
In celebration, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, alongside the French ambassador, are attending a special ceremony at Buckingham Palace where French and British guards will swap roles.
OK, let's go to Cameron Walker. He will tell us much more about all of this. Well, Cameron, what's this all about?
Well, good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. Entente cordiale translates into English as warm understanding. And 120 years ago, Britain and France signed this diplomatic agreement, ending historical decades of disagreements and laid the foundations for collaborations during World War I and World War II between Britain and France. But it wasn't a military alliance. It was very much foreign policy and that power of soft diplomacy. And the British monarchy is the power of soft diplomacy personified. And British and French officials today, during this ceremony, changing of the guard ceremony, will see it as an opportunity to show Britain and France's strength and the strength of their friendship in this uncertain world. But it is, of course, the first time that French troops will be on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace taking part in this ceremony. So 32 members of the Gendarmerie Gardes Républicaines, as well as 40 guardsmen from F Company Scots Guards, will parade together in the forecourt of Buckingham Palace behind me at around 11 o'clock. The Duke of Kent is the Scots Guards Royal Colonel, but it's going to be the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh on behalf of the King who will be inspecting those troops. This has all been confirmed, this has all been agreed by His Majesty the King, but due to his ongoing cancer treatments, he will not be here in person today. The Royal Standard is not flying above Buckingham Palace, so therefore he is not in London. But 40 VIPs will be here to watch instead, including the UK Chief of Defence Staff, Sir Patrick Sanders, the French Chief of Army Staff, General Pierre Schill, and the French Ambassador to the United Kingdom, Hélène Duchesne, as well. And although the French troops will be taking part in this ceremony, I am assured they are not taking over, they are not guarding the King. That responsibility will remain with British troops. But also, if you go to Paris today, there's a similar guards change ceremony happening at the French presidential palace, the Élysée Palace. So 16 soldiers from the No. 7 Company Coldstream Guards will be taking part in the presidential guards change. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, will be in attendance at that. And that is the first time that foreign soldiers have taken part in that kind of ceremony in France itself. So a day of thirst today here in London and in Paris. And if you want to watch yourself, we will keep you up to date on GB News here, but it takes place at 11 o'clock this morning.
Cameron, over your right shoulder, Isabel and I were just, while you were explaining all of that, wondering, what is that building behind you, or is it temporary or permanent? We're just looking at it. Neither the two of us can remember that building being there before.
Which building are you talking about, Eamonn? Not the Victoria Memorial, the one behind Buckingham Palace?
Yeah, behind Buckingham Palace.
Oh, the glass building. The glass building.
I mean, is that tower, is that the Hilton Hotel, perhaps, or Park Lane? I'm trying to think of my geography there. And Galvin at windows and all of that.
Yes, I think that is the Hilton.
It just looks so
quite possibly. It does look like it, doesn't it? It's a very fancy hotel.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, they get all the views. You could probably look right into the windows of Buckingham Palace from inside the Hilton. There you go.
Indeed. But members of the public will be able to go into the east wing of Buckingham Palace for the first time in the summer.
So you can have afternoon tea and all that there. And Balmoral. They're opening it all up.
Yes,
what do you think about that, Cameron?
Wave. Yes. Well, there's been hints that that was very much going to be happening under King Charles's reign, and I think he really wanted to open up royal residences, more of them, to the public. So for the first time, members of the public will be able to go into the centre room, which is that room which opens out onto that famous Buckingham Palace balcony, and practice your royal wave. But members of the public, unfortunately, will not be allowed on the balcony itself, but you're going to get as close as you possibly can without being a member of the royal family.
Such an iconic place, isn't it?
Well, that's your job, mate. You've got to bring Isabel and I out there for an afternoon, for that afternoon tea.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we should do that.
Oh, I will. Let's try and sort that out.
He can get us mates rates. He's all pally with the palace. Thanks, Cameron. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right, so up next, the King's plans to build a new town in Kent. Great idea. Not according to everybody. Sparking outrage. So he's got this place, is it Poundbury?
That's, yeah, is that Dorset?
Dorset.
And he's now trying to do something similar in Kent. So we're asking, is he meddling or is he mending?
But Poundbury seems to work really, really well. Unlike most developments, it's been thought out, it's self-sufficient,
and it's
whatever.
pretty.
Yeah, so we think let him do it. But however, there are people who think no. Talking about that next.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M57 on Merseyside, there's a lane closed northbound for emergency repairs at junction 1 for the M62, causing delays. In Northamptonshire on the A43, the inside lane's closed southbound with someone's broken down between the A421 at the Barleymow roundabout and the M40, causing queues. Now in London, there's a lane closed on the northbound approach to the Blackwall Tunnel where a car's broken down, with the queues back along the A2 from the South Circular at Eltham. In West Sussex on the A27, there's a lane closed westbound where a lorry's broken down between Shoreham and Lancing, causing delays. And there's widespread disruption to some train services in England this morning because of industrial action. There's no service on some routes and there's a reduced service on a number of others. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Okay, so during the break there, we were just discussing King Charles's plans. So the plan is to build 2,000 homes in Faversham in Kent. He's looking to create an ideal town.
Yes, and locals say they're not convinced. There are worries that the new town will ruin Faversham's charm.
So, is King Charles getting involved in something that's none of his business? Should he stick to royal duties? That is our debate this morning. Joining us, Head of Republic, Graham Smith. Good morning, Graham.
Good morning.
And the Sunday Mirror's royal reporter, Sarah Robertson. Very good to see you. Sarah, could you just sort of outline to us what the whole concept, the whole vision is?
Yes, so what the vision is King Charles is wanting to build 2,500 homes in the Kent town of Faversham. But what I'd like to say is it's not going to be built all at once. It's 120 homes per year over the next 20 years or so. So he's not coming in like some mass housing estate like Wimpy Homes or something like that and just plonking new builds up. That's not what he's doing. It's going to be very, very carefully structured to make sure the town is able to cope for the infrastructure, for the roads, schools.
Yeah.
He wants to create a new rural community because he's seen what's happening with the population rise, with obviously the high levels of immigration coming in, and that people are complaining and saying they need more housing around the country. So like what he's done with Poundbury, which has been a very, very, very big success down in Dorset, very tasteful in keeping with the countryside. This is about a long-term plan to preserve the environment, but also create
a community.
A community.
Because the thing is, developers come in and they build 2,000 houses.
Yes.
And they become car cities.
Exactly.
You have to have a car then to get to some industrial estate where the supermarket is and whatever. But what he's doing is he will incorporate a post office, a bank, whatever, and it all becomes a community for this. And
that's it. That's what he's trying to do. He's so passionate, is King Charles, about what's going on with the countryside and the environment. These are things he's felt strongly about for years, causes that he's taken to his heart for years, and his legacy. This is part of his legacy of what he wants to leave behind when his reign's gone, and he wants to be seen as this pastoral king who is taking care of the countryside and the environment and the villagers in it. It's something he really strongly believes in, and this is all to help those living there. It's not against it.
So you see him as a mender. Let's bring in Graham Smith, who very much sees him as a meddler. Look, however good his intentions, you'd argue totally unqualified, not voted for in a democracy. What right does he have to dictate what kind of houses we're building? Is that what you'd say?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit odd to say that this is part of his vision as an environmentalist when he's building on farmland.
They're sustainable homes, aren't they, that he wants to have?
He's building on farmland against the wishes of the people that already live in the area. But I should also point out, it's no longer him doing it. This is William's project now. It's the Duchy of Cornwall project. William took that over when Charles became king. But like his father, he pretends to be an environmentalist. Both of them are incredible hypocrites on the environment. They have huge carbon footprints. They fly everywhere by helicopter, and it's all for show. And I'm sure that they believe they're sincere, but they don't seem to think that all these things count, apply to them, that they can go on living their huge carbon footprint lifestyles whilst lecturing everybody else, saying, even though we have no experience of living in villages and towns and having to go to the post office or the bank, we're going to tell you what the ideal town looked like and plonk it in these farmlands right next to your village, which is incredibly arrogant of them. But this is about the Duchy making profit, which the Duchy then doesn't pay corporation tax. All the profit then goes into William's pocket.
Yeah, but he'll create this fantastic living area, Graham. And
well, that's very much a matter of subjective opinion as to how fantastic it is. Whether or not there's a post office or a bank there will be determined by the post office and the bank, not by Charles or William.
Well, the post office is on the high streets now anyway, because they're all closing.
Yeah.
So King Charles is trying to bring them back to the community.
Which is what you really need to be doing, is building on brownfield sites in communities that already exist, not doing this vanity project that Charles and William seem to be keen on. Now, I should say also that we're talking about, should they be allowed to do this? The Duchy is not the planning laws and regulations and the environmental laws and regulations do not apply to the Duchy because they demand exemptions from a huge swathe of laws, which allows them to get away with what they want. Now, they do go through the planning process because it makes it all look okay and it all looks like it's being done properly. But if they really wanted to do it, they could just turn up and build on that land, and there's very little that anybody can do about it. They continue to demand exemptions from huge swathes of legislation the rest of us have to abide by.
Is this Duchy land that these houses are being built on? I wasn't clear whether the land belongs to them already, because you say, why aren't they doing this building on brownfield sites, whatever? Presumably the royal family don't own any brownfield sites.
They own loads of brownfield sites. The Duchy of Cornwall is a huge property empire. It's not Cornwall itself. It is an organisation that has that name, and it has land right across southwest England and South England and Kent and in London. They own the Oval cricket ground, and it is essentially a corporation that makes a huge profit and passes that profit on to William without paying any corporation tax. And this is just another commercial project aimed at making money for the duchy.
No, I disagree there with you, Graham. I have to say that, because you said there about building on brownfield sites. Yes, I do take your point there, but the King realises that cities now are at bursting point, that cities aren't coping as they are at the moment, and why should everybody be living in tiny, squashed apartments in the way that you're suggesting?
Brownfield sites doesn't mean
what he's
tiny,
trying to
squashed
do
apartments.
is bring life back to rural areas. He wants to see more young families start up in rural areas. It's very important. He's trying to protect the countryside. This is why he's doing this. As I've said, everything is done with the aim of trying to help the agricultural industry, to help the countryside, to help the environment, and to create something that's aesthetically pleasing. Who wants to live in those
He's literally
awful
building on
prefab
agricultural land.
monstrosities
He's
that we see
building
in
on
cities?
agricultural land. You don't help agriculture by building on that land. I mean, the point is that Charles hasn't the faintest idea how the rest of us live. He's never lived in these places. He never has to walk down the road to the nearest bank or go to the post office to post a letter. He doesn't understand. Of course. I mean, the point is that
have you lived in Poundbury and seen Poundbury and decided?
No, but I know that plenty of people have criticised it. But the point is, he doesn't have any understanding.
Or is that just people that, you know?
Yes, some people who live there criticise it. Some people like it. But the point is, Charles doesn't have any personal understanding of these things, and what he's doing instead, or now William, as he's taken over since this project was launched, is simply saying, right, that we own that land, so let's plonk a bunch of houses on it and we'll make money off it. Okay. And then dressing it up as environmentalism and caring for the community, when in fact the community doesn't want it.
We've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Very good argument. But I don't listen. I just don't think. No, I think the thing about Charles is that he cares and he will think about this right through. And I would take a house in whatever development he was looking to build.
Yes.
And I wouldn't mind living beside it as well. It'd be good for your property.
Go on then. Yeah.
Exactly.
Graham definitely won't. That's the views of the panel this morning. Let us know what you think. Don't forget you can have your say through our brand new system. We've got away with the emails. Now we're on to our website. You go to gbnews.com/your say, and you can even interact with each other and share your views on there. Lots of them have been coming through this morning. Thank you very much for trying out our new system, and have your say on the debate. Is the King a meddler or a mender?
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Well done. Thank you very much indeed. I'd love to see a big plan of that development that he's looking to put together. Right, we've got the newspapers. We're talking about the big stories with Don Neeson and Lewis Oakley right after this.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Is it okay to call people fat? I won't call Bev fat because she isn't. She won't call me fat because I'm not. But the fitness fanatic, Derek Evans, you might know him better as 90s icon Mr. Motivator, recently told a podcast, diabetes have gone through the roof. You should be able to call people fat.
Well, he joins us now. Good morning, Derek. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you. So I think what you're getting at is this idea that we've become so polite about weight that we're ignoring the elephant in the room. If you'll forgive the phraseology there, and actually sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind.
Well, actually, this has been taken out of all context. I actually didn't say you're entitled to call people fat. What I did say is that in the 80s and 90s, I remember the way I got into television, there was a gentleman walking at reception while I was waiting for the people I was training. And for some reason, I got up and I prodded him in the belly. And I said to him, you need to deal with that. That was fat. We have a nation where obesity, diabetes is killing every one of us. And unless we take responsibility for our health, rather than waiting for government to do this, government to do that, it is our responsibility, right, to look after our independence and our health. And as we get older, it's even more critical right? And that's why I'm here as an example saying to you, listen, I'm 71 years of age and movement is medicine. And you can't sit around watching television and not going out to the gym or wherever. You will never, ever be able to look after your family and everything you've worked for. You will lose it. I've never seen a hearse, a deposit account behind a hearse. No matter what you work for, the most important thing you can do with your life is every hour, do something active. Every hour.
I'm Patrick Christies. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christies tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, we're going through the papers this morning with the former editor at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the writer and podcaster, Lewis Oakley. Welcome back. Thank you to both of you. Lewis, let's start with you. At front of the Telegraph this morning, and there's more about William Wragg and his latest victim, Dame Andrea Jenkins, now saying she was also targeted and what he did was unforgivable. Does he need to stand down, do you
Wait a minute, so
well,
these are just explained to people because I'm a victim of these myself.
These honey trap scams.
Honey trap. If I'm trapped in another honeycomb, whatever it is.
Holmes honey trap.
Anyway, these are the dangers of how to avoid or get involved in or whatever you're doing with a honey trap, Lewis.
Yeah, so, I mean, the pressure's building on him to face some form of punishment. I mean, it is just beyond parody that a sitting MP would start getting messages from a number he did not know and start responding with new pictures. I mean, surely...
That's the first thing you do, isn't it? Somebody I don't know, never heard of, I'm going to send them a picture of my nether regions.
But is it not through a gay dating app? So is there a question about whether MPs should be allowed to go on dating app like Grindr and things? Well, this is kind of what happened.
I was told this was messages, and today there is talk of a gay dating app. So who knows how many platforms this was happening on. I think the problem is here, if you were Rishi Sunak, right, you've got this, you've been told a few other people might be implicated, you probably are like, don't stand down, and I'm not going to punish you because I need to figure out how widespread this problem is. So if I get rid of you and then 10 more people are implicated, half my cabinet's gone.
And I think that's why Labour are being a bit hands-off on this as well. In the election,
everybody's going
all over this, wouldn't they? But it's like,
crikey.
You know, Tory sleeves. It's like, no, let's all be kind. Let's take a step back because no one knows exactly who else has been caught up in this yet.
Isn't it? And you just think, surely, I mean, one MP doing this, but the idea that this might be widespread?
Lewis, how stupid are they? Seriously?
So the idea is that once they're hooked on this and they send pictures and whatever, they're compromised.
Yeah.
And they can be manipulated and used and blackmailed. And
well, I've got nude pictures of you. I mean, obviously, if anyone were to ever publish them, that would be in the revenge porn territory, so that person would face prosecution. And obviously, if this is blackmail, that's also a legal matter. But, you know, there are people that might have sent nudes that might be married, for instance, or not out. So it gets very complicated very quickly.
But I suppose there's also the question, and look, call me old-fashioned, but there's the thing about, you know, MPs, whether they're the pillars of the community, the people that you go to with your problems, you don't necessarily think of them as people who are photographing their genitalia and broadcasting it around to people they've never met. But is there a question now about, well, is that really relevant? They've got a private life. That's kind of what happens in dating these days. They're entitled to do that.
But they also have a position of responsibility.
But is it irresponsible to do that?
Yes, it is a security risk, isn't it? I mean, and what is... I mean, you know, send pictures of whatever to whoever, provided you're all consenting, obviously. But it was giving the information away about colleagues. That is where I think this is unforgivable and incredibly stupid. Especially, it's a lot of the people involved in this, as far as we're aware, are young advisors. So they're young men, potentially young women, whose details are out there now as well. And that is unforgivable from an older man.
And I think as a society, we've been trying to educate young people, teenagers, do not do this. Those pictures will be there forever. So grown MPs are doing it. I mean, it's just beyond.
They're volunteering it.
Yeah.
They're putting
But what about this argument? Because he's the, I think, is he the chair of the 1920? Not the chair. He's
Deputy
the
chair,
deputy chair or vice. I've got it written somewhere
he's
here.
supposed to be holding everyone to
he's
high
the vice
standards.
chancellor, but he's also supposed to be representing backbenchers, the very people he's been selling down the river.
Exactly.
But Mel Stride was saying this morning, it's not for me. The 1922 committee holds us to account. It's not for me to say whether to stand down. But the principle, the idea that you could still hold a position of responsibility representing people and doing that.
His credibility is gone. I think it's just he's probably lucked out with there are other people implicated, so they're probably not going to move to get rid of him until they've got an assessment of that. Also, you're in an election year, stumble on, we're not in a good place anyway. They've probably got no one to replace him with.
Well, there
so
is
he
that.
might luck out in that sense, but it's not morally right.
Okay.
I would say send in your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say, but make sure it's all legit and above board on that one, please.
Don't send the pictures.
No
We don't need
pictures
the
required.
pictures.
Thank you.
Pictures are responsible for a bit of a boom in afternoon teas taking place in upmarket restaurants.
I love this story. It's like young folk again, Gen Z. There is a boom, as you said, in afternoon tea. Waitrose reported a 60% rise in people searching for afternoon teas. And it sounds lovely, doesn't it? It sounds very civilised, and young folk, rather than going out and doing sex and drugs and rock and roll, they're having scones and finger sandwiches and a nice cup of tea. The reason behind it probably, though, is that afternoon teas look good on Instagram. So it's all about the social media thing. There might be other reasons. One of the other reasons quoted is the fact that the late Queen having afternoon tea with Paddington Bear, that helped as well. But it's mostly a social.
Can we just discuss the concept of afternoon tea? Because the idea that people would have afternoon tea and then have a meal in the evening, like it is substantial. Not only is it 3 tiers, but it's like people used to do that every day. They'd have cucumber sandwiches, and then they'd have, as you say, scones, gone, whatever you want to call it, all these little fondants and cakes, and then their dinner.
But Isabel, the obesity problem in this country really is scary. Now listen, I'm be seen as an overweight man. I am practically anorexic compared to most people out there. Honestly, I spent the weekend I was out, I was socialising, and particularly women.
Look at me like that, Eamonn Holmes.
Well, not you.
Well, you're a fitness fanatic. I mean, you are. I'm saying, it's not just men get to a certain stage, they drink pints, they get to a certain stage, but women now go 2 and 3 times beyond this. I really do think it's really, really scary.
Well, we have this conversation often, don't we? And we are scared about talking about it because you get the fat-shaming accusation. But until we start talking about the obesity crisis in this country, which is increasingly affecting children as well. I mean, how many sort of like youngsters are obese now?
Why is it a crisis now if they used to eat afternoon tea and then have their dinner afterwards? I don't understand.
It's totally different.
Preservatives and everything. And people walked more back then.
That's true. Well, that is true.
Walking
We're all
is
sort of
so good for just
now.
getting the pounds off.
And so much physical work. Work was physical in those days. I mean, now people sit behind desks and just deal with phone calls and things like that. But I do think that people can say, as you say, Dawn, people can say, oh, fat shaming this. I'm not. I'm just being very, very scared by this.
We need to have this conversation.
I mean, I'm not just talking, she's got a bit of a tummy or her backside's big or whatever. Absolutely massive.
We've got 30 seconds, but I really want to touch on this cat story as a mad, crazy cat lady. What's happening with kitty cats?
There's a 34% in abandoned cats, unfortunately. Yeah, so, I mean, there's a nice case study of some that 6 little cats that were saved. They've had to have some operations. It doesn't really give a lot of the detail onto why cats are being abandoned, but I guess it's to do with vet bills, big litter, the cost. But don't abandon them. You can't just... I mean, I think these ones were dumped beside a garage, and you can't do that to little cats.
No, I could love any waif or stray. Really sad to hear that. Dawn, Lewis, thank you both so much. I want to say goodbye. Yeah, send it to me. I'll never say no. And we say good morning, Marco.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm afraid we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing further spells of rain at times, coupled with quite strong winds at times too. Back to the detail for today, and we've got some bright weather across the south and east of the UK during the morning, but notice showery bursts of rain out towards the west, up across parts of northern England, and further showery bursts of rain will work their way up from the south into many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, after a bright start, will see some rain later, whereas Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine throughout the day, just a bit of patchy rain across the far south later on. Feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine in the north, up to 12 degrees, but the warmest temperatures generally down towards the southeast, coupled with that wind and rain though. As for the evening and during the overnight period, we'll see some clearer spells developing across the southeast of the UK for a time, and some clear spells towards the far northwest, but on the whole, low pressure will be dominating the scene, giving a lot of wind and rain, particularly windy down towards the southwest, and wherever you are, with that wind and rain around, it will stay quite mild for the time of year. As for Tuesday, well, another very unsettled day on the cards across the UK. Low pressure sitting right across the UK, bringing spells of wind and rain. The wettest weather generally likely up towards the southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Could see up to 2 inches of rain in places here. And the windiest weather generally out towards the west and across some southern coasts of England, with gales in places here at times. Temperatures generally cooler than over the last few days, up to 12 or 13 Celsius at best.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M1 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed northbound where someone's broken down between junctions 39 and 14 in Wakefield, causing delays. On the M57 on Merseyside, there's a lane closed northbound for emergency repairs at junction 1 for the M62, and it's sloped towards and past there. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, 2 lanes are closed anti-clockwise where someone's broken down between junctions 15 and 14 from the M61 Swinton interchange to the A580 East Lancs Road. There are queues from junction 19 at Haywood. In Oxfordshire on the A43, the inside lane's closed southbound where someone's broken down just off junction 10 of the M40 near Brackley, causing roughly 3 miles of queues. In Essex, the A414 is partly blocked eastbound on Edinburgh Way in Harlow, causing queues, and there's widespread disruption to some train services in England this morning because of industrial action. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock. It's Monday, the 8th of April.
Breakfast here on GB News. You're very welcome. Eamonn Holmes, Isabel Webster.
Top story, police have launched a manhunt after the fatal stabbing of a woman in Bradford on Saturday. We'll be keeping you updated on progress in that story.
A boost for pensioners as the government's state pension rise and a raft of other benefits are set to be introduced from today.
Very high compared to what we had under the last Labour government, and many of your viewers may remember the 75 pence increase that occurred to the state pension under Gordon Brown, and we had very high levels of pensioner poverty under the last Labour government.
Yes, a boost for senior citizens today, but if you're one of them, are you beginning to feel a bit better off? And if so, are you more likely to vote for the Conservatives at the next general election?
Labour's pledging to digitise NHS records in a bid to prevent future disease outbreaks amongst children and getting the NHS up to scratch.
Because I think the NHS should have the staff, the equipment, the technology it needs without relying on the private sector. But I've got to deal with the world as it is after 14 years of Conservative government, not the world as I would wish it to be.
It's the 120th anniversary of the Franco-British alliance. A ceremony at Buckingham Palace with French personnel in attendance will mark the relationship later today. We'll be speaking to royal biographer Angela Levin.
Hello, good morning. We'll see some bright weather around today, but things will generally be turning more unsettled as we go through the day, particularly across parts of England and Wales. I'll have all the details later.
Oh, there's been changes here, and we obviously are very interested in your views on stories and want to get you involved as the People's Channel here. Now, there's a new way to get in touch.
Yeah, there is. We're asking you, instead of sending emails, to put your views and your posts on our website, gbnews.com, and go to /your-say. Here's a little instruction kit on how you can do it.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your-say.
You go, and actually lots of you loving it this morning and having conversations with each other, which you obviously couldn't do on email. It is the first day this has been up and running, so thank you for having a go, and we hope to get more and more of you using that as we go.
Okay. Top story on this Monday morning. Millions of elderly people are set to be better off from today as a £900 pension boost comes into force with new triple lock changes.
Yeah, and not just changes for pensioners, all working age benefits such as job seekers allowance, housing benefit and universal credit are also set to rise.
Let's get a roundup on this and a summarisation from our political correspondent Catherine Foster. And there you see our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis. Catherine, to you first of all.
Yes, so if you're a senior citizen, good news today, the state pension going up by 8.5% because the government has maintained the triple lock, which gives pensioners the greater of either average earnings growth, inflation, or 2.5%. Other benefits such as job seekers allowance, housing benefit, universal credit up by 6.7%, which was the rate of inflation in the autumn last year. Now, the triple lock is very, very expensive. It was introduced by the Conservative government in 2011 because at that time there was a real issue with pensioner poverty. Pensioners were doing not well compared with other groups. Since then, it has largely protected them and benefited them hugely. And of course, I think we do need to be mindful that there is a general election coming up this year. We know that senior citizens vote in greater numbers as a proportion than any other age group, and also are more likely to vote Conservative. So the government will be hoping that this will be repaid to them when senior citizens come to the polls. It's not entirely clear, however, that that is going to happen.
OK, Catherine, thank you. Well, let's cross to Will. As you can see, a bowling green behind him. And indeed, I believe you're joined by a pensioner who can chat to you about those changes coming in from today. Over to you, Will.
Good morning. Yes, not necessarily my natural habitat, but it is the natural habitat of Ray, who's been bowling here at Erewash Indoor Bowls Club for quite a number of years. You're the chairman, but you're also a pensioner. Are there lots of pensioners here that might be talking about the new pension rates today?
There are. We're predominantly an ageing club. I guess that 80% of our members are probably over 65. So yes, they are pensioners.
How much will this new pension rate mean to them? It's the triple lock, so it's going up by 8.5%, which is the same as average growth of earnings.
Yeah, it sounds that way, but actually it's not quite 8.5%, because they're going to take 20% income tax off most of us here, because most of us will probably have a small private pension. What really annoys most people is, I think, that having worked for perhaps 50 years, paid in their dues over all of those years, and the government has the audacity to turn me to benefit. You know, we've paid for it.
It's about an extra 10, maybe £20 a week for the average pensioner. Is that going to be enough? And what are the costs of pensioners facing?
Well, I don't think it's enough, really. I guess everybody will say it's not enough, but the problems are council tax up £10, car insurance gone up £150 this year, vehicle tax going up £20. That's nothing to do with utilities. I mean, I know that we're saying utilities are coming down, but realistically, they're not really coming down that much. Probably most people are on a fixed term anyway, so they're not going to see any difference till September in any case.
And the cost of a membership for a bowls club or any other club that pensioners might like to be a part of, is that going up as well?
It is indeed. I mean, our subs will be due in September. We'll be looking to increase those subs. We've just suffered a gas utility bill of £4,400 just for the month of January. That doesn't count electricity. So yeah, we've got to get the money from somewhere, and it can only come from our members, who unfortunately are already under pressure.
Ray, thank you so much, and thank you for the bowlers who've come in a little bit earlier. The league doesn't officially start on a Monday till about 10:30, but we'll be here all day hearing the views of our local pensioners in Erewash, Long Eaton, as those new rates come in.
So you say that's not your natural habitat. You look very at home there, Will. We want to see you having a go next time later on in the day. I think you're going to be there quite a long time. So, yeah, let's get you bowling. That's what we want to see. Thank you, and thank you to you, Catherine, as well.
I'll try my hand.
Fabulous.
Thank you. What I'd give just to be able to do that.
Yeah? Are you any good at bowling?
Don't know.
What about like 10-pin bowling?
But now I just couldn't physically do it. You know,
really, just the action.
Bend down or balance even with it. But there we go. We now move to Yorkshire. Police have named a suspect as the search continues for the man who stabbed a woman to death in broad daylight. This was in Bradford city centre. Yeah,
West Yorkshire police detectives are now searching for 25-year-old Habiba Massoum. They were called to the scene on Saturday afternoon following reports of an attack.
Let's now talk to our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley for more on this. Anna, good morning.
Good morning to you both. Yes, that manhunt, as you say, continues to find 25-year-old Habiba Massoum. Police describing him as a man of slim build, an Asian man of slim build. It comes after a 27-year-old woman was fatally stabbed to death while she was in this area, the Westgate area of Bradford, in broad daylight on Saturday afternoon. She was pushing her baby in the pram when the attack happened. Luckily, nothing happened to the baby, but tragically, when she was rushed to hospital, she died of her injuries, and then that is what has caused this ensuing manhunt following her murder. Police have said that the victim is known to Massoum, but has not gone into the details of their relationship. Police have also said that he's from the Oldham area, but that he has links to Burnley and links to Chester, and he's also been spotted on CCTV as well, wearing a duffel coat with 3 large horizontal lines of grey, white and black. Also that he's wearing light grey or light blue or grey tracksuit bottoms with a small emblem on the left pocket and maroon trainers. A witness has also said that they saw him shortly after the incident wearing a grey hoodie with the hood up. Now, West Yorkshire Police, as I've mentioned, said that they want people to contact police with sightings, but not to approach Mansour. We don't know if he's still armed. Certainly, a knife was found at the scene, but he may still be armed. They've said we had significant resources following up a number of lines of inquiry to locate Habiba Massoum, but at this time his whereabouts are unknown. A knife was recovered from the scene of the murder, but we cannot say if he's armed, and I would urge anyone who does see him not to approach him, but to call 999 immediately. If anyone has any information about his movements or whereabouts since 3:20 p.m. on Saturday, please contact police as a matter of urgency. They also go on to say, we understand that the murder of a young woman in such shocking circumstances has caused considerable concern in the local community, and they've said that residents can expect to continue to see a significant police presence in Bradford as they make further inquiries and conduct reassurance patrols in the area. And of course that's what police are saying, but when we have more updates on this fast-moving story, we will bring them to you.
Of course, Anna, so disturbing, absolutely shocking, ghastly situation. Thanks for the update, appreciate it. Britain's newsroom at 9:30. Andrew and Bev, what have you got?
Manners.
Yeah,
I've got good manners.
I have excellent manners.
But Generation Z,
don't care.
They think it's OK to put your elbows on the table. OK to...
How else are they going to hold their phone whilst eating if they haven't got their elbows on the table?
Now, you see, I'm a stickler for manners, but elbows don't offend me.
Not really.
I'm not a Philistine.
No, I don't mind elbows. If you listen,
if you're
listening to somebody, sometimes you like to lean forward.
You can look elegant with an elbow.
I do.
Yeah, but it's just the whole thing about table manners. It's a good debate.
It's just good to bash the Gen Zs, let's be honest.
But Andrew, there's so few tables about nowadays. They're building houses without dining rooms, and you know, it's become less and less a thing that the family would spend time sitting around a table.
Absolutely.
You remember Sunday tea?
Yes.
It was a great...
Oh,
six of
very
us
much so,
around a very small table. Red Formica, as I recall.
Yes!
And 60s and 70s. But that was a great tradition. And there'd have been no elbows on the table then.
Pensions as well, triple up. We're going to be talking about that, what that will mean for people. In a way, the pensioners might be the only voters the Conservatives have left.
Yeah, but there's a sting in the tail on that, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
And, of course, we're having a debate about Angela Rayner. At times she told us a little bit more about her living arrangements.
I feel a bit sorry for Angela Rayner on this story.
Don't feel sorry for her.
I do.
David Lammy's excuse, the shadow foreign secretary, this man's been foreign secretary in a few weeks' time, said, she's northern. Oh, different rules are they if they're northern?
Does that mean we can keep more of our money if we're northern?
And she's not in government, and you judge by different sets of standards if you're in government. No, she wants to be.
Well, look, they could
Deputy
put
Prime
this all to
Minister.
bed if they just came out and provided the evidence to the public, and we could all draw our own conclusions.
She should have walked.
She should have been.
She should have walked straight into it from the start and just said, "Look,
she's dug a
maybe I was badly advised. Maybe I slightly bent the rule, and it would have all gone away."
And it's not very much money, but it's now become an issue about, is she telling the truth?
Yeah. I don't know whether you've experienced this morning, but we have a new messaging system on GB News as of today. So instead of waiting for your emails, we get live feedback.
Yeah, we've been looking at gbnews.com/your say.
Exactly. So that will be fun for Andrew and I.
They're interacting with each other, and they can like or dislike comments.
Nice. Yeah.
So
you know,
it's worth watching to see if we can use the technology, or if Andrew can use the technology
I won't
at
be able
least.
to use the technology, absolutely.
But we will be hearing from you in live, in immediate time, in actual time, won't we? In real time. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good show. Right, biggest prize of the year so far, £10,000 in cash. There's luxury travel items and a £10,000 2025 all-inclusive Greek cruise.
Yeah, and as Eamonn said, this is a very bespoke cruise. This is not any old cruise. Here's your chance of how you can win.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats streets. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
After the break, looking forward to speaking to royal biographer Angela Levin to talk about all things royal after this.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is the brand of toothpaste super important here, or is it more about the toothbrush? Because I was told a long time ago by my dentist, electric toothbrush, Pip, that is the way to go.
You're exactly right. I mean, the action of mechanically removing plaque, so using a brush, is much more effective than the brand of toothpaste itself. But in terms of the ingredient in toothpaste that we're looking for, it's something called fluoride. And fluoride is essential to help remineralize and strengthen our teeth. It's really important to use a toothpaste with fluoride. And in terms of brushing, using an electric toothbrush is just much easier. You know, you're brushing your teeth first thing in the morning, last thing at night. You're going to be a bit tired in those times. So using an electric toothbrush, you just hold it against your tooth and gum and it does all the work for you. So it's just much easier in my opinion.
But you have to use your electric toothbrush properly.
You're exactly right. Yeah, there is a technique of actually brushing your teeth, although it sounds really simple. With an electric toothbrush, you have to hold it against the tooth and the gum. Ideally, you want a pressure sensor in that toothbrush so you know exactly when you're pressing too hard. But if you're using a manual toothbrush, you need to move it around and small circular motions. But actually what I see is people who use manual toothbrushes, they tend to over scrub and over brush, which can actually lead to gum recession and your enamel thinning long term.
Sometimes I will get up in the morning and I will have breakfast and then I'll brush my teeth. Is that wrong?
Unfortunately, that's wrong. So the best time to brush your teeth is first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up. If you're brushing after you eat and after breakfast, you're brushing your teeth in that weakened acidic state. So your teeth are actually under attack and they're much more vulnerable.
Now, today marks 120 years of the official alliance, the Entente Cordiale between Britain and France.
In celebration, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will attend a special ceremony in Buckingham Palace where French and British guards will swap roles. I didn't even know the French had guards,
no.
similar to our own there.
School day. Well, Angela Levin, royal biographer, is here to tell us more, as well as all sorts of other royal matters. Good morning to you, Angela.
Good morning, and welcome.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, thank you.
The jeopardy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be quite negative about this. I think we've given £500 million to France so that they stop all these migrants coming. They shouldn't. They haven't done a good job. I think they've done a very, very poor job. They keep sending it over to us.
So it's not a cordial entente for you?
Well, it might be for them, but I think, well, what are you doing? I don't want French people in Buckingham Palace. I want English people in Buckingham Palace. They're tearing English apart in every possible direction. We should stay with it. If the soldiers are there for us, That's what they should be. We can't do that over in France. We'd look absolutely ludicrous. So, you know, we can meet for meals and can be friendly, but I think it's very, very annoying.
OK.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There we go.
OK. Now, on the I was away over the weekend. I didn't get a chance to see, but I think on Friday night, this programme on Netflix, Scoop, debuted. Tell us about Scoop. So this is about the Prince Andrew interview by Emily Maitlis.
Yes, and when it finished, he said so many things that were completely wrong and inappropriate. And when he finished, he said, well, I think that went very well. Would you like to come round and I'll show you the palace? So not only did he say ridiculous things, but he didn't even realise, he didn't have that self-understanding about it. So this is because of the producer who didn't feel that the BBC treated her well enough that she actually got the Prince to talk.
This was Sam McAllister.
Yes. And this is her story, really. It's 3 chapters of her book, also called Scoop. And the acting is brilliant. That was Billie Piper, who captured her totally, the way she walks, the way she speaks. I know her a little bit, and it was wonderful. And I thought the acting everywhere was very good. But it did knock the Prince in a slightly vulgar way. There's some pictures where he's coming out of the bath and we see his bare bottom, right? And you think, what on earth?
Gratuitous.
Yes. And Rufus, who played him...
Rufus Sewell.
Yes. He had to have stuff on his own bottom because he couldn't eat enough that it would be anything like Giles.
To plump it up. Yeah.
Crikey. Yeah. But it was also... And then we were shown that he had 72 teddies on his bed. He is obsessed with having teddy bears ever since he was a little boy, collected them in the Navy. And he does that. He does have them put round his room in a special order, and on the bed in a special order. And he was shouting at the maid. And I thought that's not really what this is all about. This is really about a producer and indeed a presenter coming up with a very good story, and also how hard we work. I mean, but you do know that you don't just ring someone up and say, will you come along? They say yes, even if they're well known. It's hard work, you have to have patience and all that. And I thought that bit was very interesting. But there seems to be a bit of a row between Emily and Sam, because Emily had a vast amount of money, £345,000 a year, and Sam was paid £30,000 a year, and they thought that was really... she felt it was unfair. But Emily is going to do her own show in a month or two, but it's going to be 3 episodes, which I think is probably more than enough for anyone. But you know, it had good points and not so good points, captivating you or actually making you feel this is really creepy.
I mean, it just takes you back to the morning after when that aired, and we were all going, are you kidding? And you just got the sense Prince Andrew was just blindsided by his own kind of, well, silly comments, frankly.
Yeah, silly comments that he didn't actually have sex with anybody underage because he took Beatrix to a Pizza
Express in Woking.
Yes. You know, and all those things which were very ridiculous. It's okay. It's okay. I did...
But you know, I mean, you know the man himself. I mean, there is a grandeur about him, there is a pomposity about him, isn't there?
Yes. I mean, he's quite spoilt because the Queen adored him. And she always gave in to him, well, nearly always gave in to him, and he thought he was really grand. And having been, again, the spare, the second one, just like Harry is to William, you feel you've got to be powerful and you've got to show people what you really feel, and you're very, very important. And because he doesn't judge himself, and this is very highlights what he's like, he then gets into all sorts of mischief and money details and business stuff, not really understanding how he should behave.
Yeah, well, it's all going to be there, not only a scoop out, but then, as you say, there's a second version of this, which we'll expect to see shortly.
Emily wanted to give her view.
Fair enough. Yeah, this is all through Sam's lens,
very
isn't
good.
it?
OK. Thank you very much indeed, Angela. Really appreciate that. And that concludes our programme on this Monday. So thank you very much indeed.
We'll be back bright and early from 6 o'clock tomorrow. But up next, of course...
Have I got to come in earlier tomorrow?
Yeah, sorry, the 7:20 start, it's not going to cut it unless you've got another storm.
Today. No plans to get on any planes, no plans to be delayed.
Maybe we'll go on a quick flight tonight, see how that goes.
Or tea at Buckingham Palace, that's a whole other thing.
See you.
Andrew and Bev next, have a good day.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm afraid we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing further spells of rain at times, coupled with quite strong winds at times too. Back to the detail for today, and we've got some bright weather across the south and east of the UK during the morning, but notice showery bursts of rain out towards the west, up across parts of northern England, and further showery bursts of rain will work their way up from the south into many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, after a bright start, will see some rain later, whereas Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine throughout the day, just a bit of patchy rain across the far south later on. Feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine in the north, up to 12 degrees, but the warmest temperatures generally down towards the southeast, coupled with that wind and rain though. As for the evening and during the overnight period, we'll see some clearer spells developing across the southeast of the UK for a time, and some clear spells towards the far northwest, but on the whole, low pressure will be dominating the scene, giving a lot of wind and rain, particularly windy down towards the southwest, and wherever you are, with that wind and rain around, it will stay quite mild for the time of year. As for Tuesday, well, another very unsettled day on the cards across the UK. Low pressure sitting right across the UK, bringing spells of wind and rain. The wettest weather generally likely up towards southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Could see up to 2 inches of rain in places here. And the windiest weather generally out towards the west and across some southern coasts of England, with gales in places here at times. Temperatures generally cooler than over the last few days, up to 12 or 13 Celsius at best.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
So there's a manhunt underway this morning in Bradford. Our reporter is there after the death of this young mother. Tragic.
Pushing a pram with her 5-month-old baby, stabbed to death. And manners.
And manners. Should you put your elbows on the table? How else are the teenagers going to hold their mobile phones? That and Angela Rayner. How much trouble is she in?